I would give somebody 3 to 5 days if they want to explain to me the connection between Judaism and Zionism. And then when they sit there with no coherent, logical answer, that'll be enough for the audience. What in the world does a atheist German Jew who's married to a Christian, let's say, who celebrates Christmas, doesn't believe in God, doesn't celebrate any Jewish holidays, no religion at all, have in common with a Yemenite religious Jew? Tell me, are they from the same border? No.
No, those
are they from the same lineage? No.
In that instance, they would argue they do have similar lineage going further,
How far back? To Abraham? But then we have the Arabs.
But this is my point. It's a social construct.
No, but what is the construct? We know what a Jew is. Everybody knew once upon a time what a Jew is. The Jews always defined themselves in this way until this idea of secular Judaism came, or Zionist Judaism, and now they cannot define what a Jew is. The Zionists tried. They don't have an idea. Jabotinsky held that the Jews are a race. Ben-Gurion said there is no definition of a Jew. Jews don't have a definition. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew. The Zionists believed, like the anti-Semites did, that the Jews were decrepit, ugly, weak, immoral people, and they wanted to fix the Jews. So they figured that Zionism will change the aspirations of the Jews, the values of the Jews, the characteristics of the Jews, and even the genetics of the Jews. Now, if I would say God is all-powerful, I would add a word kaviochel. Kaviochel means in a manner of speaking. God is powerful, kaviochel. In modern Hebrew, kaviochel means as if. You see the mockery that they were trying to do to Judaism?
You think that was intentional?
Of course it was intentional. We know it was intentional. Of course it was. Now I'm holding a book called A Place Among the Nations by Benjamin...
Cover that face up. Yeah, we don't...
By Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm just anti-Zionist is the equivalent of I'm not anti-American. I just think the United States shouldn't exist. In other words, you cannot say I'm against an American national identity. That's what he says. I think the United States of America should not exist, but I'm not anti-American.
He's not talking about an American nationality. He's on about a state.
Oh, but don't forget, Israel is the state of the Jewish nationality. In Israeli law, if you're born Jewish, I say me, and I would one day, or somebody, not me, I'm not going to do it, would decide one day to convert to another religion. Guess what? According to the law of return, he's not Jewish. Israel, by the 2018 nation-state law, is not the state of the Israeli citizens. It's the state of the Jewish nationality, which means if you are an Israeli citizen, but you're not Jewish, you are a citizen of Israel and you have whatever rights they give you. But Israel is not your country. However, according to Israeli law, Zionism, Israel is my country, even though I have nothing to do with the state of Israel. And even if I was able to trace my lineage up to the days of, let's say, King David, there were non-Jews living there also. I would still be a non-Jew. You have to be a Jew. That makes it different than all other countries. That's another story with the fear-mongering. Okay, so you're not a Zionist, you don't believe in Zionism, but if you don't support Israel, and if you don't relate to Israel, and if you don't stand with Israel, and if you don't agree with everything Israel does, then the crazy Islamists, the jihadists are going to take over the world. They want to change the world order. And there are neighborhoods in England, I'm sure you've heard this, that the police are scared to walk into because of Sharia law runs the neighborhoods.
Someone recently told you that.
Yes, that the
police are afraid.
Whole business with Israel and the Palestinians is a microcosm of a fight against the new world order to implement a caliphate. Muslim caliphate all over the world. For example, all these immigrants into Europe that are changing the culture of Europe. And one of the examples, I said, where in the world are you getting this from? And this is the best, quote unquote, best example he had. You know that in London, there are neighborhoods that you can't walk in. Sharia law runs the place. The police don't even have power over there. I don't know anything about Islam. I don't know more than the next guy. But studying Jewish books, I know that they quote Maimonides, Rabbi Chesdoi Kreshkash, the Ralbag, Ibn Rushd, Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi, Al-Ghazali, and others. I know about the differences in the first cause dependency argument for God's existence, which is in every single, I say this without reservation, every single, from the Middle Ages, Jewish philosophy book that discusses God. And people don't believe me. Muslims, what do you mean? They want to blow up the world.
Thank you for having me at your house, brother.
Thank you.
Yaakov.
Thank you for coming.
We had a bit of a chat earlier with regards to Zionism, Judaism, anti-Semitism. I thought this hypothetical would be interesting for those who, perhaps, they're new to this topic, let's say. If you had the world's attention for, say, 3 to 5 minutes, and your job was to sufficiently and adequately inform them of the difference between Zionism and Judaism, such that they understand the core issues that this conflation causes and the required remedy, shall we say. How would you go about that?
To take 3 minutes to separate Judaism and Zionism, I don't think that would really suffice to explain it to the people. Not that 3 to 5 minutes isn't enough, but I would switch the question. I would give somebody 3 to 5 days, if they want, to explain to me the connection between Judaism and Zionism. And then when they sit there with no coherent, logical answer, that'll be enough for the audience. You can ask somebody what the difference is between a chair and a table. But if you ask them the difference between a chair and a flounder, then that's a more difficult question to answer. If people know what a chair is, and they say, well, you know what, this is a flounder, that's not a chair. It's going to be more difficult. The difference between Judaism and Zionism is not like a chair and a table. It's more like a chair and a flounder. Or rather, even a better example, that describes the distance between them. But the relationship between them, they're not just two random things that have nothing to do with each other. They do have to do with each other. Zionism's relationship to Judaism is like the relationship of a cure to a disease. To Zionism, Judaism was a disease. Zionism was the cure. Zionism was the penicillin. Judaism was the sickness. And the Zionists wanted to cure the Jews of Judaism, replace Judaism with Zionism, and then the result would be, first of all, a rehabilitation of the Jews. The Zionists believed, like the anti-Semites did, that the Jews were decrepit, ugly, weak, immoral people, and they wanted to fix the Jews. So they figured that Zionism will change the aspirations of the Jews, the values of the Jews, the characteristics of the Jews, and even the genetics of the Jews, actually. And then the Jews will be good people, just like the Cossacks and the anti-Semites and the Aryans, and then the whole world will like the Jews. The last page of Theodor Herzl's book, The Jewish State, it's like the climax of the book.
Who is Theodor Herzl?
Oh, Theodor Herzl, he died in 1904. He is referred to as the father of political Zionism. He did not invent Zionism. Zionism was invented like in the 1800s by people before Herzl. There was Moses Hess, even Emma Lazarus, who wrote that a poem under the Statue of Liberty that's sitting there. There were pre-Herzlian Zionists, but what Herzl did was he was kind of the operations manager. If it wasn't for Herzl and his project, so Zionism would have been some obscure philosophy that people would be discussing in cafes, but it never would get off the ground. Herzl actually made a program to bring it to fruition. Zionism was the rehabilitation of the Jewish people, to change the Jewish people into normal people like everybody else in the world, in the view of the Zionists, of course.
Okay. That's probably information overload for some of the guys. I love what you hear online and in media and say defenders of, well, they would claim to be defenders of Jews and defenders of Israel and defenders of Zionism all in one. They'll often say stuff like 90% of Jews are Zionists. So the separation that you're making here. What's the core difference, essentially, is what I'm asking. One is a religion and one is a political body, or how would you put it in layman's terms?
Judaism is a religion. Being Jewish means that you are given a covenant by God to fulfill 613 commandments. Yeah. The whole entire world is obligated by what we call the Noahide laws. Noah was given, let's just put it that way, 7 commandments for his seed, and at Mount Sinai in the biblical story. So the Jews were given the Torah and 613 commandments. Anybody who is obligated to fulfill those 613 commandments, that means he's Jewish. In fact, every time you see the word Jew, you could replace it and throw in someone who's commanded in 613 commandments. And that's basically it. Yeah. Now, of course, they're developed around that community that was there at Mount Sinai that accepted the Torah, an entire I wouldn't say culture, but an entire way of life based on the 613 commandments. There was no Jewish culture per se. There are Jews all over the world. There are Jews in Germany, European Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, Germany, France, Hungary, Poland. My family's from Poland. And then there are Jews in Yemen, Morocco, Syria. There are Jews in Ethiopia. So there's black Jews and white Jews, and the cultures have nothing to do with each other. We'll take the Syrian Jews or the Yemenite Jews. Their dress was more Arabic than the Ashkenazi Jews.
Right.
They literally would wear turbans and robes. And my son has a friend whose grandfather there's a picture of his grandfather on the wall. He's sitting on a carpet with a hookah and an earring. And he was Orthodox Jew.
So the culture differs.
The culture of the Arab Jews was very Arabic. Their music of the Arabic Jews, the Jewish music, is Arabic. Their accent, even their Hebrew accent, it sounds much more Arabic than it does Ashkenazi Hebrew. So, for example, we don't have in Ashkenazi Hebrew a W sound.
Okay.
It's a V instead of a W. But many Sephardi Jews do have a W sound.
Right.
And that's an Arabic thing. In Yiddish, there's no W sound. In fact, I was once listening to a Sephardic rabbi speak, and he was talking about the letter of the Aleph base, the Hebrew alphabet. He was talking about the wow.
Yeah.
I was thinking, what is a wow? And then I realized he meant what we call the letter Vav.
Okay.
In his accent, it's a wow. Their accent is Arabic. Their culture is their food is Arabic. They eat lahmacun and not gefilte fish.
Right.
They eat Arabic food. They have Arabic culture. The common denominator is the religion. That's it. The 613 commandments. Then, of course, there are the converts who are Jews. You can convert to Judaism.
Right, yeah.
Right? Donald Trump's daughter is a convert to Judaism. So the common denominator between all Jews is the being commanded in 613 commandments. There have been Jews that don't believe in the commandments. They don't believe in the whole story.
Meaning they're born from a Jewish mother, but
correct.
They sort of are not convinced by God.
They're atheists.
Right.
Or they're semi-atheists or whatever they may be. Or perhaps like many of the original Zionists were once religious and then threw it away.
Right.
So a lot of them just didn't want to be Jews because what's the point? And they tried assimilating into the non-Jewish worlds, but it didn't work because the anti-Semites persecuted them as Jews. So now they were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. They didn't want to be Jews because the definition of a Jew, the idea of a Jew, was the religious Jew.
What time period are you talking about here?
Late 1800s.
Okay.
And the non-Jewish world, the anti-Semites, wouldn't let them be non-Jews. So they had to have all these different definitions of Jews. So then there were various different answers to what to do. So there were Jewish communists, and if you believe in communism, it's because everybody's treated equally.
Right.
And so they figured Jews will be treated with equal standing if communism is implemented. And one of the ideas was Zionism, because during that time period, nationalism was a big thing.
Right, yeah.
People were becoming nations and nation states and nation building. So they figured, you know what, if we do this to the Jews, then we could change our entire identity and personality and everything. And instead of being people that we have to do something, and instead of being people that commanded to do these commandments and stuff, the Jews are going to be a nationality.
Right.
Especially since at the time there were already evangelical Christians, the Protestants, who believed that the Jews are going to return to their lands before the second coming of Jesus. And they actually started Zionism. Many ideas that we attribute to Jews mistakenly, many even sayings and ideas and concepts and even biblical interpretations were actually evangelical Christian. So the idea, for example, I'm sure you've heard it, that the Israel or Palestine was to the Jews a land without a people for a people without a land. Who invented that? The evangelicals. The evangelicals were the first to say that. The idea to speak Hebrew. Why would the Jews speak Hebrew? The Jews haven't spoken Hebrew for thousands of years, and there's no reason for them to speak Hebrew. In fact, they purposely abandoned Hebrew because Hebrew is a holy language. And once upon a time when the Jews were very holy and they were in holy places, so they spoke Hebrew biblical times. But afterwards, they abandoned Hebrew. They spoke Aramaic, a dialect of Aramaic.
Right.
And then they spoke whatever languages in the lands they ended up. The Arabic Jews have friends, Orthodox Jews. They live in Brooklyn, from Syria, originally, Aleppo, Damascus, and they call Hashem Allah. And instead of Im Yirtzeh Hashem to say God willing, they say Inshallah.
Right.
I learned all sorts of Arabic expressions from them.
So the culture you're arguing here is totally separate between these different groups of Jews.
There's nothing to discuss, of course it is.
But there's a common ancestry. The four mothers I'm often hearing, was it four mothers of the tribe, right?
Well, there were four mothers, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah.
Right.
Those were the wives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Right.
Which is fine, except that
because the argument, sorry to cut you off, that those that state that Judaism and Zionism are synonymous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so far, I haven't heard any reason why they should be even similar. But
or that Jews are a race, for example, or they share a culture. Or they argue, for example, that they share this lineage. If you go back, this ancestral lineage.
From who?
Which is this question that I was asking you just now.
Well, as you know, Abraham had two sons, Isaac, Yitzchak, and Yishmael. And the Arabs are descendant of Yishmael.
Yeah.
So the Jews and the Arabs are one race also then, right? Because we're all descended from Abraham. That's why they call it Abrahamic religions, correct?
Right.
Does that make any sense? Or let's go.
They don't
further.
Usually include Islam.
Why?
In that
But why? Islam is a religion, which is 1,500 years old, roughly. That's a religion. We're not talking about religion. You're talking about descent. And if you're talking about descent, then why not make all Abraham's children cousins, right? One big tribe. Or Isaac himself had two sons, Yaakov and Esau. And the Romans tradition tells us, and other non-Jewish nationalities come from Esau. So what is this idea of common descent? First of all humans have common descent from Adam, right? And then there's Noah. Everybody comes from Noah because there was the flood, right? And so where do you draw your taxonomy lines over here to say, okay, well, these four women, you may be referring to something else. Besides the biblical story, there's some theory of DNA that 30%, I think it is, that's approximate to the best of my memory, of Ashkenazi Jews come from four particular women. That's Ashkenazi Jews, and what made those women Jewish, and why use those four? It doesn't make any sense, the idea that Jews are a race. How could they be a race? You have Ethiopian Jews, you have German Jews, blonde hair, blue-eyed German Jews. You have converted Jews. How in the world can you convert to a race? More than that. First, how can you convert to a race? Secondly, you have Jews of all different races. Third, as you know, according to Jewish law, if your mother is Jewish, you're Jewish. If your mother is not Jewish, you're not. Even if your father is Jewish, does that follow the rules of how races are normally understood? No. Because whether you're Jewish or not follows Judaic halachic law. Halacha, Torah in Arabic would be Sharia.
Right.
According to our Sharia, if your mother is commanded to fulfill the 613 commandments, you are now commanded as well. That doesn't follow father. Actually, in Judaic law, there were 12 tribes. Jacob had 12 tribes for children. And each tribe had their own flag, they had their own symbol, they had their own, I don't want to say culture, but they had their own, let's say, way of living or mannerisms. And the law is in Judaism that if somebody marries outside of the tribe, a different tribe, a Jewish person,
Right, right.
the family affiliation depends on paternal lineage, not on the mother. So if you're from tribe A, the father's from tribe A and the mother's from tribe B, the kid is from tribe A. Regarding inheritance and tribal affiliation, it all follows the father. The only thing that follows the mother is how many commandments are you obligated to fulfill? 613 or 7. Now, there's a whole theology behind this. The whole theology of Judaism is that we're here in the world temporarily, and there is an afterlife that goes on forever, and whatever commandments we fulfill in this world stay with us forever. You know, it's kind of like, as our sages say, today is the day we work, and then we just get the reward, or we reap the benefits of our work, spiritual work in this world. So every individual has an individual job in the world. God decides what time and place everybody is put. He decides whether you're a man or a woman. He decides your various circumstances, because the world it's like an individual test. God takes a soul, and then he says, okay, what tests do I want to give this soul? That'll decide if he's rich or poor, if he's Jewish or non-Jewish. If he's non-Jewish, he has a choice to be Jewish. If he's Jewish, he doesn't have a choice to be non-Jewish. God decides whether he wants to give him a choice or not. God decides where in the timeline he's born. If he's born in the days of the prophets, or he's born in the days of, I don't know, Donald Trump. What country is he born in, etc. And there's a whole theology about this world being just kind of a graphic user interface. The whole material world is just a front for a spiritual world. And a person's spiritual status is really his core being. And the material world are just tools to fulfill God's commandments.
Just a quick question, just circling slightly back. What do you understand a race or ethnicity to be?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. I know that there are different ideas of what race or ethnicity is, but pick your choice. None of those ideas, none of them fit the Jews. Let me succinctly repeat that. There is no common denominator.
But does it have to be one singular common
tell me
denominator?
It could be more than one thing, but you tell me, just give me any logically coherent and intellectually consistent criterion or criteria of what makes somebody Jewish.
No, the thing is, the point I'm trying to make here is all of these things, race, culture and so on, they can all be put down to essentially like social constructs,
Fine, so let them be.
But what's wrong with it? What's wrong with there being a Jewish social construct aside from the religion? Let's say if they call it something else. Let's say if they didn't use the word Jew or Judaism, but the same group of people said, look, we have a mixture of a shared lineage. We have a mixture of a shared culture. Some the Ashkenazi Jews between themselves have a similar culture. To
an extent, right?
Right, like the.
Well, here's the answer to your question: who are you going to put in this group?
But this is precisely my point.
Let's say
it's a social construct.
No, but who socially constructed it, and what's the criteria of being in that group? In other words, you just said you have a group. There's no such thing as Jews, so you have a group of people.
No, I'm not saying there's no such thing as Jews.
But let's say there would be no such thing as Jews. Okay. Let's not use that word, right?
Okay, yeah, I'm just saying they take a different term.
So but what unites the people under that term, whatever you want to use? Nothing. Yeah. There is nothing.
No, but why does it have to be one singular?
Give me two things. Give me any amount of things. Give me any criteria that you choose. Anything. Could stay here all night if
I'm
you
saying if you take the Ashkenazi Jews, they will have a similar culture between themselves.
That's true.
Yeah?
The Ashkenazi Jews too.
Sephardic Jews.
Fine, but
they will have some similar culture.
That's true. But
you can go back in their lineage and there is a common ancestry.
Yeah, sure, Abraham.
Right, and my point is, okay, that you'll argue, for example, well, the Arabs could be part of that. But
yes.
what I'm saying is, all these things are social constructs, so one can construct. You can draw the lines where you want. Essentially,
No, you can't.
I think. Can I give you one example? Can I give you an example?
Go ahead.
Because, for example, I'm ethnically or racially, ethnically, I think they call it, a Pakistani lineage. Now, Pakistan just so happens to have coincidentally been, granted independence from India in 1947 as well. So, on a paper, I tick, ethnically I'm Pakistani. But if I go back 100 years, actually my ethnicity is now on paper the same as the guys on the other side of the border.
Fine.
My point being, this is all just made up.
That's true.
By humans.
That's true.
So why can't they make their own thing up?
Because they can, but there is nothing that they made up. Meaning, what do you mean made up? In the example you gave. So you have a common denominator that you and all the other Pakistanis are a group.
Just the border, yeah.
The border. That's a border, and it's made up. But you do have a common denominator, made up, granted, but it is common. We're all Pakistanis, or we're all Indians, or we're all Pakistanis of those people who were once Indians. Any criteria you want, make up your own club. But there has to be a common denominator between them to be in the same club. The Jews have none, nothing, zero. What in the world does a atheist, German Jew, who's married to a Christian, let's say, who celebrates Christmas, doesn't believe in God, doesn't celebrate any Jewish holidays, no religion at all, have in common with a Yemenite religious Jew? What? Tell me, are they from the same border? No. Are they from the same lineage? No.
In that instance, they would argue that they do have a similar lineage going further,
How far back? To Abraham? But then we have the Arabs. Tell me at what point...
But this is my point. It's a social construct.
No, but what is the construct? There is no possible construct that unites these people.
Well, they exclude the Arabs in this construct.
But so what are they including? Tell me, when they decided to make this synthetic construct, describe the construct. It has to have some criteria. Otherwise, how do you know if you're Jewish or not?
It's a mixture.
Well, good. Tell me what the mixture is.
Okay, well, from my understanding, it's essentially they look at lineage. So are either of your parents Jews and so on, or your grandparents?
No, you mean according to Jewish law, if your mother is Jewish.
I'm not talking about the religion here per se. I'm talking about the sort of social construct that they have.
But who's they? Who are these Jews?
Well, I mean, I'm not necessarily.
Wait, who are these people? When you say it's a social construct. Besides, you can't do that. You can't say you look at what's a Jew. You look at one of your parents and say if they're Jews, that makes you a Jew. You can't use the word you're defining in the definition. In other words, if I say what's a dog,
I understand this.
And you can't say right if you were born from two dogs, that makes you a dog. You can't do that. You can't say what's a Jew. Well, if one of your parents are Jewish, that makes you a Jew. That's not a definition. You can't use the word that you're defining as part of the definition. You need to give me any criteria you want. I'll give you anything you want. That you have a population, let's say synthetically constructed, called Jews or anything you want to call them.
No, but that is always the case, though, isn't it?
That's fine, but it doesn't work with the Jews because there is no either synthetic or organic common denominator between them at all. There's nothing. In your case, you could say you're Pakistani. I could say all left-handed people who when they play baseball, they bat right and they throw left, and they're born while there was a war anywhere in the world, and they like spaghetti. I could make that one group of people if I want. But anybody who is in my group has to fill those criteria.
They don't have to fill every criteria.
Give me any criteria. In other words, I'm making the group. I could do whatever I want, right? If I say, okay, one of these 6 things, fine. Give me the criteria within which all Jews fall.
So let's say there are 6 things, for example.
You won't find any.
And you just have to tick one of them.
There are none. There are none.
I'm saying, okay, let's say either of your parents. I mean, you have
you can't do that. You can't say either of your parents are Jewish. You got to explain what a Jew is. You can't do that.
Okay, so Are you saying the issue here is we're not able to define from the get-go what a Jew is?
No, we are able to define, and we always have defined. It's very simple. If you have a chair and you do not want to accept the definition of a chair, and let's just say somebody's going to write in the comments, oh, that's not the definition of a chair. Let's just say, for the sake of the argument,
sure, yeah.
The definition of a table is a platform that you put things on that has legs, that can stand on its own. Now somebody comes, a group of people, I don't accept that's the definition of a table. See that thing over there, that table? That's not what I defined it as. That's not the definition. Okay, fine, give me a definition. And you can't. That's the problem. We know what a Jew is. Everybody knew once upon a time what a Jew is. The Jews always defined themselves in this way until this idea of secular Judaism came, or Zionist Judaism, and now they cannot define what a Jew is. The Zionists tried. They don't have an idea. Jabotinsky held that the Jews are a race. Ben Gurion said there is no definition of a Jew. Jews don't have a definition. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew. Yes, but if it doesn't have a definition, then how do you know you're a Jew? In Israeli law, by the law of return I'm talking about, if you're born Jewish, I say me, and I would one day, or somebody, not me, I'm not going to do it, would decide one day to convert to another religion. Guess what? According to the law of return, he's not Jewish.
But that's a state and its policies.
Fine, but they're defining what a Jew is. And it's inconsistent. What I'm saying is, it's not that we don't know what a Jew is. We do know what a Jew is. But if you don't want to agree, then fine, no problem. Give me another definition. And now because you will not be able to give me an alternative definition, and by that I mean any logically coherent and consistent definition that you're willing to say that if you have these or any of these characteristics, give me a choice, whatever you want, that's a Jew. And if you don't have any of these characteristics or all these characteristics, you're not a Jew. Give me any criteria. Nobody ever came up with any because there were none. Jews are around for thousands and thousands of years, and this is how we always defined ourselves, until there came this idea of secular Jews. So I'll give you an example. And here's where Zionism starts. I have over here a copy of an article from a Zionist publication called The Maccabean, August 1902. Okay? This article is called Dr. Herzl's Evidence Before the Royal British Commission on Alien Immigration. So he was talking to this Royal British Commission on Alien Immigration. There was various dignitaries from Britain, and they were talking to Theodor Herzl about a Jewish state and Jewish nationalism. Okay, it was the 16th sitting of the Royal Commission of Alien Immigration. So they asked Herzl, well, definition. Major Evans Gordon asked, would you say briefly what your views are to Herzl about Jewish nationalism? Answer. Herzl responds, I will give you my definition of a nation, and you can add the adjective Jewish. A nation is, in my mind, a historical group of men of a recognizable cohesion held together by a common enemy. That is, in my view, a nation. Then if you add to that the word Jewish, you have what I understand to be the Jewish nation. So they asked, what would be the common enemy in this case? Herzl's answer, the anti-Semite. Meaning, the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre also said this, but Herzl said it first.
Right.
The definition of a Jew, according to Theodor Herzl, is whoever the anti-Semites hate.
Yeah.
Now, there's a problem with this.
Kind of anti-Semitic, maybe.
First of all, yes, honestly, I can't think of anything more anti-Semitic than to define my Jewishness by being hated by the anti-Semites, but worse. Go ask an anti-Semite, how do you know who to hate? Who's a Jew? So I did actually. I won't mention his name, but I once asked a world-famous anti-Semite.
Okay. I'll kind of want to know who it is, but okay.
I'll tell you offline. Sure. Actually, he's from England. But I asked a world-famous anti-Semite, I said, who do you decide as a Jew?
Yeah.
So he says, whoever identifies as a Jew, I look at as a Jew. So now you have the Jew, Herzl, saying, whoever the anti-Semite hates is a Jew. The anti-Semite says, whoever identifies as a Jew, I hate.
Yeah.
So you have the anti-Semite saying, whoever identifies as a Jew, and the Jew saying, whoever this guy hates, if he hates me, I'm a Jew. And the anti-Semite saying, if he identifies as a Jew, I hate him. Doesn't make any sense. Without anti-Semites, there wouldn't be Jews. Now, by the way, this explains a lot about Zionism.
Okay, yeah.
First of all, you may have heard, I've heard it so many times, that, well, when you say that the definition of a Jew is such and such according to Jewish law, they'll say, yes, but Hitler didn't distinguish between this kind of Jew or that kind of Jew. So let's psychoanalyze the mind that would give Hitler the right to define who a Jew is. He becomes the rabbi.
Yeah.
Don't forget, Jews have been around for thousands of years.
Yes.
Hitler was not. But Hitler gets to define who a Jew is? Like, what kind of crazy thing is that? That is a evolved version of Theodor Herzl's theory, that the anti-Semite gets to define a Jew. There is no intrinsic reason why anybody would identify as a Jew per se. It is only the anti-Semites that made them into Jews. In fact, as I mentioned before, people like Herzl didn't want to be Jewish. In fact, he had a plan to convert all Jews to Christianity. It's in his diary. It was more like a dream. And one Sunday afternoon, all the Jews are going to go to the church. He's going to be the last surviving Jew. They're all going to go convert to Christianity, and that'll be the end of anti-Semitism. He preferred Christianity to Judaism, by the way. You know, there's an old Jewish joke. What's the difference between Jesus and Herzl?
Right.
Jesus celebrated Hanukkah. Herzl celebrated Christmas. Okay? But the only reason why these early Zionists had any interest in being Jewish is, as I mentioned, because the anti-Semites persecuted them as Jews. So now their entire identity is being hated. Could you imagine what that does to a person?
Yeah, psychologically.
The entire identity is being hated. This is Theodor Herzl, the father of political Zionism. And a modern version of this is, well, Hitler didn't distinguish between, let's say, a religious or a non-religious Jew, or that's, I can't imagine something besides, it's anti-Semitic, obviously,
Yeah.
but something so repulsive that I should define my identity based on the fact that certain people hate me. That's crazy. But then these people become a nationality. And by the way, Herzl said all nations are like that, a common enemy. So it makes French people French, is, I don't know, because the English don't like them, or they have an enemy or something like that. That is the borders of a nation. And the Jews, that's what he said, that's a nation in general, a historical group of with cohesion. I'm not sure exactly how he would fit the Jews into that part of his definition.
Right.
But this idea that united by a common enemy.
Right.
I'm sorry. You know what unites the Jews? Our religion. You don't want to be united with me? So you're not. But that's all my Jewishness is a relationship with God. And yes, because of the theology, my fellow Jews are close to me, just like members of all religions have a connection with each other. There are responsibilities Jews have for others. And there's a whole theology about, as I mentioned, a spiritual world where Jews are connected spiritually to each other. But if you don't believe in the religion, I don't believe, and nobody was able to give me a coherent argument against this. If somebody doesn't believe in the religion, then what is his connection with me? Culture? I'll tell you something about Jewish culture, Ashkenazi culture. There is American Jewish culture and British Jewish culture. They're different. And the British Jews took on some of the British mannerisms culture-wise. Like Americans are more I guess they speak, let's say, more aggressive or blunt, than the British. The British Jews, the Orthodox Jews, are like that too. And if you go, I could take you to a Jewish commercial neighborhood here where all the restaurants are. You know what the Jewish food is? Mostly? Sushi and pizza.
Yeah.
That's mostly the Jewish food. There is no Jewish culture. There is communities of the Jews that created cultures, like all communities. There is not only Ashkenazi culture, but the Manhattan, the New York type, Upper West Side, non-religious Jewish culture. But that's not anything that unites Jews. The question is, what determines if somebody's Jewish? Simple question. What determines if somebody's Jewish? I'll give you a very simple answer. If according to the Torah, he's obligated to fulfill 613 commandments. That's it. Not 99% of the time, 100% of the time. That's always the way we defined it. Now, there are some questions. Our scholars have questions. I'll give you a question.
Sure.
Now, a person can convert to Judaism, right? And the law is that you could take a minor, let's say a baby, abandoned babies, if people adopt babies, a Jewish couple, they'll convert the baby to Judaism.
Oh, how do they do that?
They do it there's religious ways.
The baby.
The baby. But the law is, because the baby is unable to choose, meaning a minor. And you talk about anybody under bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah, 12 or 13. The law is that when they become of age, they could renounce their Jewishness.
Okay.
They could say, I don't want it. They have to choose, like either yes or no.
Yeah.
Now, a pregnant woman, let's say, she converts. The law is, according to Jewish Sharia, that the baby is born Jewish. But the question is the baby considered a convert, having converted with the mother before it was born as an embryo? Or is the baby considered born Jewish? The difference is, when that baby becomes of age, can he or she renounce their Jewishness? It's a very big question amongst our scholars. And therefore, if you ever want to convert to Judaism, make sure, if you're a pregnant woman, make sure you have your baby before you convert.
Right, okay.
Because otherwise, if the baby grows up and doesn't want to be Jewish, it'll be a question if they'll never know for sure. There'll always be a disagreement amongst our scholars if that person is Jewish or not, if they decide to renounce the Judaism. So don't do that.
How does this work in terms of difference? Because we have similar things in Islam, where you have two different scholars giving two different opinions. Is one right and one's wrong, or they're both potentially right?
Well, it depends. It's like anything else.
I mean, in this example that you gave.
The reason why I gave this example is because of all the Jewish questions that I know that are disagreements. I would say offhand that this is probably the most difficult.
Difficult, okay.
This is probably the most difficult to find a conclusion for.
Right.
And it's not a little thing. And normally, often, let's say if there's a question if a piece of food is kosher or not, if it was slaughtered the proper way, just don't eat it, eat something else, right? Over here, you don't have that option. A person, whether they're Jewish or non-Jewish, that is relevant to their entire way of life, how they're obligated to live. So this is a major question, and it's of major disagreement. Now, what we do normally is, yes, somebody could be wrong. You have to disprove them. There could be disagreements. It's the same, I don't want to say the same because it's not exactly, but a fuzzy comparison is, let's say, I don't know, any other discipline, let's say medicine. There could be doctors that disagree. Are they wrong? Well, sometimes the guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's probably not a good doctor. And sometimes they're really not 100% sure.
In Islam, we have some things are categorically right and wrong, but there is an area of acceptable disagreement.
Yes, we have that also. For example,
okay, this is what I'm asking.
Yeah, we have that also. And if you want to know one of the differences between Zionism and Judaism, about how Zionism tried to poison Judaism.
Right.
So I'll give you an example.
Sure.
In the Talmud, there are some times where there are such questions, where there are questions that they don't come to a conclusive answer. The sages don't come to a conclusive
Or
answer.
we have where they come with two different scholars who come
Well,
with
no,
different
not
answers.
not even two different. Let's
Well,
say
both are acceptable,
Let's say
potentially.
one that's possible too to happen.
Okay.
But I'm talking about a case where, let's say, even one scholar comes up with a question and nobody can come up with an answer.
Okay.
We just don't know. Nobody can bring a proof. So we have a rule for that. A word, actually. It's a word called teku.
Okay.
Teku. It means when Elijah the prophet comes back, he'll give us the answer.
Right. Okay.
But in the meantime, we don't know. Now, what to do if you
What
don't
kind
know?
of question is that? What
There are a lot of different
are they
questions.
hypotheticals or something? Or?
Sometimes hypothetical, sometimes not hypotheticals.
Right.
And what you do in such a case, if it happens in real life, so we have rules what to do if you don't know an answer. But
Yeah.
the words teku, which is, I don't know, T-E-I-K-U, I guess in English you would spell it,
Okay.
or T-A-I-K-U, that's a Talmudic word, and it means an unanswered question in rabbinic law. In modern Hebrew, they took that word, and you know what it means? A tie in a soccer match. You see the mockery that they were trying to do to Judaism?
You think that was intentional?
Of course it was intentional. We know it was intentional. Of course it was. Pick a number from 1 to 10. That's how many examples I'll give you. Or 1 to 100. We have a word regarding God. Kaviochel. It means like this, that we, especially in Islam, this is a big thing I know, that in the Bible, it describes a lot of times God in terms of anthropomorphisms, attributes. God gets angry, God has outstretched arm, things like that, right? Now, we know that God is totally kuloi poshut, purely simple. He doesn't have any attributes that would be an idolatrous.
Unimaginable.
Not just, yes,
As in
unimaginable, but also having no attributes. We only have negative attributes, meaning we know what God is not,
right?
But what God is, there are no comprehensible attributes, nothing.
Well,
so therefore,
all powerful, no?
What?
All powerful.
Well, no. All powerful would mean, well, it depends what you mean by that. If you mean
he has control over everything, dominion over everything. You know?
Well, that would be the wrong way to say it.
Okay.
Even though sometimes we do, in a manner of speaking.
Sure.
The more precise way to say it is that there's nothing that he can't control.
Okay.
There's nothing that's out of his control. But when you say he has dominion, that means that's something comparable to a human being that has dominion. When we say dominion, we mean there's like a cause for the dominion. There's like power. If you say he's like the strongest, the most powerful, right? It's not true. That means Superman is the most powerful. God, he doesn't need power. Power is the ability to overcome resistance, but nothing resists God. It's not that he can do things more than anybody else. It's that there's nothing that can stand in his way. He doesn't need power. When we say all-powerful, what we mean by that is he doesn't need power. When we say that he's...
This is just semantics, though, really.
No, it's not. It's not semantics.
Because whatever word you use, it's not going to...
No, because power is an actual attribute, and power is a physical attribute.
Okay.
And even if it's not physical, if it's mental, whatever it is, that would make God into a measurable thing. Not measurable is the wrong word. It would make him into composite. It means he would have parts. He would have power, and he would have knowledge, and he would have life. But the combination of those things would be God. But that's not true. That's not God. God is not a combination of attributes. God is purely simple. So what we say is that when we say God is strong, it means he doesn't need what we call strength. When we say that God is all knowledgeable, it means he has no ignorance. But it's not knowledge. He doesn't need knowledge. How he knows things, say he knows things is the wrong word. He is the knowledge, the knower, and the and the object of what he knows. But it's something way beyond our comprehension, because God is what we call kuloi posha, totally simple.
Is that a Hebrew term? What did you
Kuloi poshut, totally. Kuloi means totally.
Yeah.
Poshut means simple.
Okay.
Not composite, not murkov, not put together. Because then that would be a cause. As you know in Islam, you know it from Ibn Sina, and I know it because the Jewish philosophers quote him and others like him. God is not composite. He's not dependent on anything. But if he would be dependent, we also don't want him to be dependent. We don't believe he's dependent on the combination of strength and wisdom or anything like that. That would be, he would be dependent upon the cause. He has to be causeless. The cause of God's existence would be the combination of all these attributes.
The negation of all these attributes.
We negate the attributes.
Yeah.
That's why we say it in the negative, not the positive. Now, if I would say God is all-powerful, I would add a word kaviochel.
Okay.
Kaviochel means in a manner of speaking.
Yeah, this is precisely what I'm saying. It is ultimately limited to our speech.
But we say God is powerful, kaviochel. God got angry, kaviochel.
So to speak.
Right, so to speak, exactly. In modern Hebrew, kaviochel means as if. So I would say,
we're circling back to the mocking.
The mocking, exactly. That's another example. The word agadata or agoda in the rabbinic language means the parts of our law that are not sharia, that are not legal, but rather ethical or moral or tales of great people. In modern Hebrew, agoda means a fairy tale.
Okay, let me just ask you on that.
It's a mockery of Judaism.
I mean, okay. The Zionists are mocking Judaism, is what you're saying.
They hated Judaism, and they hated what Jews were. They hated Jews. And they wanted to, they tried not being Jews, but it didn't work because of the anti-Semites. So they were stuck, literally stuck with their identity. As Herzl said, we're a nation. Distress holds us together. What are we going to do? We're stuck being Jews. So we have to change ourselves. We now have to change our personalities and our characters. The Zionists looked at the Jews as anti-Semites did. They made statements like, Jews are ugly, Jews are disgusting, and we have to change them. The way to change them is to nationalize them. Nationalism is going to change the Jews from this, in their minds, crazy fantasy people who spend their whole lives peacefully, value harmony and peace and studying, and this cerebral, nerdy, I guess you could call it, Jews that spend their life preparing for the next world. No. We're going to be like the Russians. We're going to be like the British. We're going to win gold medals. We're going to have an army. We're going to win Eurovision song contests. And we're going to be normal people. And we're going to change ourselves into normal people. We're going to give ourselves a flag. Jews never had a flag because we weren't a nationality.
You did say the 12.
Each tribe had, but there was no Jewish flag. There were tribes and families. I have a family. And in Europe, actually, there were families with family, emblems.
But did those 12 tribes encompass all Jews?
In those days, yeah, sure.
So what would
Today
be wrong with
converts.
So what would be wrong with tracing your lineage back to them and then having one flag to unite them all?
Because we're not a tribe. On the contrary, there were 12 tribes and they had their own flag, but we're not a tribe. What are the converts going to...
Sorry, are you saying all Jews are descendants from those 12?
Unless they're converts.
Bar the converts.
Yes.
You can have an exception. You can have an exception.
But it's not, no, you can't have an exception.
This is not mathematics. This is humans and society.
Well, if you want Jews to be some kind of society, like a civilization, yeah, fine. But Jews never defined themselves as that. Why would we?
Why can they not now?
Why should we? What does that mean? Because we have nothing in common.
But they want to.
We have nothing in common. What do you mean they want? Who's they?
I'm talking about like Zionists, I guess.
Let them.
Modern day Zionists.
Let them. But that I'm not included in that. They can define whatever they want.
But
if the Zionists go around saying we're a new type of Jew, we're Zionists, we're national
if they
Jews,
use a different term,
I don't let them. I want them to say we're Zionists. But the problem with problem with Zionism is, look, there are a lot of different offshoots of religious interpretations of Judaism. I'm Orthodox, right? There's Reform Judaism, where there's no requirement even to believe in God. But they believe that Judaism is a religion, but it's a different type of religion, right? Like with the Christians, they have Catholics, they have Protestants.
yeah, like denominations.
So there are denominations. But the Reform Jew agrees that the Orthodox Jew is not one of the Reform. He doesn't represent me. We have disagreements as to what is the correct interpretation of Judaism. The Zionists don't do that. The Zionists say all Jews are a nation and we, Israel, are the state of that nation. That's the problem. If they want to say that they're Zionists and not Jews, or they want to call themselves Jews, but agree with me that when they say Jew and I say Jew, it's just a homonym. That's all, okay? No problem. Let them. I want them to do that.
So if they said we're the state of Zionists, that would be fine.
Let them.
And then say whichever Jews consider themselves Zionists, that's fine by
I
you.
mean, they would have a lot of laws to work out, but that would be like the state
that's
of
always
communists,
the case, isn't it? You know?
of communists, right? In other words, they would have to work out what's a Zionist national. Let them, but that's not what they're doing. The Zionists are saying all Jews are a nationality, which is nonsense.
Yeah.
And two, which is worse, the all Jews are nationality, we need to discuss in order to refute it. But this part, nobody needs to refute. Nobody needs to discuss because it's just a unilateral declaration that they made on their own. They are the state of all the Jews, of the Jewish nationality. They are my state. Now, as long as we got that, we know there's the nation-state law. The 2018 nation-state law.
Right.
That says...
That they
yeah.
Israel. Yeah.
Now, the most important thing, if somebody wants to understand Zionism or Israel today, this is the most important thing. Israel is different than all other countries in the world.
Yeah.
All other countries in the world are the countries of their citizens. Okay? Like America. It's the country of the American citizens. Italy, the Italian citizens. According to Israeli law, there's Israeli citizens, but there is no Israeli nationality. Israel divides their population by various terms. There's religion. So your religion is Jewish, your religion is Christian, your religion is Hindu, whatever. There's Lu'um, meaning nationality. And on the passports, it says nationality Israeli. But according to Israeli law, there's no such thing as an Israeli nationality. The passport is just to show the world.
For the rest of the world.
Rest of the world. There's no such thing as an Israeli nationality. The nationality is Jewish. Your religion could be Jewish and your nationality is Jewish. There is no Israeli nationality. And Israel, by the 2018 nation-state law, is not the state of the Israeli citizens.
Yeah.
It's the state of the Jewish nationality, which means two things. One, if you are an Israeli citizen, Israel is not but you're not Jewish. You are a citizen of Israel and you have whatever rights they give you. But Israel is not your country. Two, which means that you have no self-determination rights in Israel. And here's what that means.
Yeah.
That means, but before I tell you that, I want to say the second thing. The second thing is that I'm a Jew.
Yeah.
I never lived in Israel. My family, let's say, never lived in Israel. Happens to be I had a grandmother that was in Israel. She was there before Israel was.
Okay.
But if somebody's Jewish, he never had family that lived in Israel, never had anything that lived in Israel, doesn't want to live in Israel, never, from creation of the world till today, had nothing to do with Israel. If you're Jewish, even if you converted, Israel,
I mean, your lineage would go back there, though.
It doesn't matter. What?
You said, if you go back,
Doesn't
they had
matter.
nothing to do with it. But they probably do have great-great-great-grandparents who did originate from
Not in the state of Israel.
Not the state.
Maybe so. We
in terms of
originated
Sinai
in
and so on.
Egypt, as the biblical story says. Was Moses Jewish? Obviously. Moses
Okay, yeah.
was our greatest prophet, correct? He never stepped in to Israel, to Palestine, to the Holy Lands. Never. He died in the book of Deuteronomy. The Jews went into the Holy Land in the book of Joshua. Moses never stepped into Israel. But that's what Zionism says. According to Judaism, the Jews were created at Mount Sinai. Before the giving of the Torah, the 613 commandments, it's questionable even if Abraham was a full-fledged Jew. He was a servant of God and he knew by prophecy the 613 commandments, but because the Torah was not given and there wasn't an official law, Sharia, it's also a question amongst our scholars.
Right.
What is the status of the Jews before the Torah was given?
Right.
But at the time the Torah was given, all those people, the soon-to-be Jews that left Egypt, at that moment, the Bible says, Hayoim hazen nihiyeh shalom. Today you have become a people.
An is it?
Means a people. But it's not the modern nationality, like we say. That concept didn't exist then.
Right.
Ummah, goy, all of these things mean a little different, but they're all terms for people, etc. Today you have become a people. According to Zionism, the Jewish people were born. The people were born. The Israeli Declaration of Independence says here the people were born. But there was no state of Israel. However, according to Israel, according to the state of Israel, according to Israeli law, Zionism, Israel is my country, even though I have nothing to do with the state of Israel, nothing. And even if I was able to trace my lineage up to the days of, let's say, King David, there were non-Jews living there also. I would still be a non-Jew. You have to be a Jew. And that makes it different than all other countries. Now, every time I say this, every time I say this, or somebody comes back to me and says, that's not true. Italy believes it's the state of all Italians. There's some, Al Dershowitz says there's some law of return for Germany or people of Germanic ethnicity, or Italy, or the Armenians believe they're the state of all the Armenians, or when the Turkish president goes to Germany, there are Turks in Germany, he says he represents them. Or China says they're the country of all Chinese type people or something like that. But Israel's different than all of these things. Because how do you become an Italian? You go to Italy, you become an Italian citizen. Let's say you marry an Italian girl, you have Italian children. Let's take easiest case scenario. After 1,000 years, I'm an Italian like anybody else, right?
I suppose. Yeah, I mean, 1,000 years is a long time, so
Yeah. Same thing, China, Germany, Italy. You had some connection, but in Israel, you could be an Israeli citizen if you're not Jewish. Marry an Israeli man, a Jewish man. You have non-Jewish children. They serve in the Israeli army. They're the biggest Zionists in the world. And that goes on for 1,000 years. You are indistinguishable from a Jewish Israeli. If you are not Jewish, by Jewish law, Israel's not your country. Now, how do you become a Jew? You can naturalize, there's no process of naturalization to become a Jew, even though Jew is a nationality. So how do you become a Jew? Well, you convert with a religious conversion. You go to, let's say, some rabbi in New York who maybe is an anti-Zionist rabbi, doesn't believe in the state of Israel altogether, is against the entire existence, let's say, of the state of Israel, and he converts you to Judaism, and you're an anti-Zionist Jew. Now, you are an Israeli, a Jewish national according to Israeli law. But if you lived in Israel, spoke Hebrew, fought in the Israeli army, had children there, after 1,000 generations of Israeliness, Israel's not your country. You can be, there's a naturalization process to become an Italian. There's a naturalization process to become a German. Eventually you will be a German. In Israel, they are the country of the Jews. More than that, these Jews, they expect Jews to have loyalty to Israel. Who says this? I could quote you Jonathan Pollard, who was all over the Israeli newspapers saying that he would advise American Jews to spy on America for Israel. like he did, because Jews have dual loyalty. But you may say, okay, that's Jonathan Pollard, he's an idiot. Instead, I'm going to read you the Jewish Agency's status law of 1952, signed by David Ben-Gurion.
Right, okay.
It's an Israeli law. 1, listen to this. The state of Israel regards itself as the creation of the entire Jewish people. That means they don't want to be Zionists. They don't want to be the state of the Zionists. First of all, the language doesn't make any sense. A state doesn't regard itself as anything. You could say the Zionists regard the state of Israel as the creation of the Jewish people. Israelis regard Israel as the creation of Jewish people. By Israeli law, Israel is considered created by the Jewish people. But the language is something like weird. The state of Israel regards itself as the creation of the entire Jewish people. Doesn't mean it is. Of course it's not. There's so many Jews that weren't involved in the creation of Israel and weren't interested in the creation of Israel. Doesn't matter. The state of Israel regards itself, the state, regards itself as the creation of all the Jewish people. Okay? A little later, number 5. The mission of gathering in the exiles, meaning everybody should move to Israel, which is the central task of the state of Israel and the Zionist movement in our days, requires constant efforts by the Jewish people in the diaspora. The state of Israel, therefore, expects the cooperation of all Jews as individuals and groups and in building up the state and assisting the immigration to it of the masses of people, and regards the unity of all sections of Jewry as necessary for this purpose. Some Zionists create a country in 1948. They decided that that is the creation of all the Jewish people, and that is the country, the state of the nationality of the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, which doesn't exist. But even if it would exist, what makes that my state? That's Zionism. And therefore, Israel doesn't really exist as a nationality, as a normal country. There's an Italian nationality. There's a German nationality. There's not an Israeli nationality. You see, when people are going to write in the comments after you post this, what do you mean? There are a lot of nation states, states of nations, not just of their citizens, like Italy, like Germany. But what nation is Israel the nation state of? Not the Israelis.
Yeah, I see.
It's the state of the Jews. They invented this. They invented this unification of the Jewish people as a nationality. But not only did they do that, the state of Israel regards itself, whatever that means, as the creation of all the Jews, and therefore Israel expects all Jews to cooperate in helping Israel build itself up and move everything. That is Israeli law.
This was 51 though, did you
53, 52.
Is this something they still uphold?
Worse. It's worse. It's worse. Then came the nation-state law of 2018 that said that Israel is the nation-state of the Jewish nationality. And only Jews have self-determination rights in Israel, and now I'll tell you what that means.
Yep.
Because you, as an Israeli non-Jew, doesn't have to be Christian, Muslim, Hindu, whatever. Because it is not your country, you have no self-determination rights, meaning only Jews have the right to govern themselves. That's what self-determination means in Israel.
Yeah.
Which means that, I'm sure you've heard the arguments that, well, I mean, Israel's a perfect democracy. There are Supreme Court justices that are Muslims, and this, aside from various other arguments.
Right, yeah.
That's a mistake, because
it's carefully controlled.
Aside from all of the carefully controlled, by Israeli law, you non-Jews, put them all together, Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Druze, all these people put together, as long as they're a minority, they can do whatever they want. They can be Supreme Court justices, but they have no right to control the country, even if they become a majority, because they have no rights to self-determination in this country.
What if they were elected, though?
Oh, so that's a problem. So it never happened yet. What if they would become a majority? What if, because of birth rate? So that's a very good question, and nobody knows the answer to that. But it does explain why one of the reasons Israel does not annex the West Bank and Gaza and make the Palestinians Israeli citizens who were conquered, let's say the way America made the Mexicans in Texas into Americans, Texans, right? They can't because they have to ensure a Jewish majority. Now, one of two things. Either they're going to make laws. Will they make laws that, because of the 2018 nation-state law, according to Israel, they don't have a constitution, but according to basic laws, which are the closest thing to constitutional laws.
Right.
According to Israel's basic law, only Jews have a right to self-determination in Israel. Therefore, the non-Jews do not have a right to govern themselves. The Jews have to govern them, even if they're a minority. And it doesn't matter if they're elected because basic laws need more than just a majority to overturn them. Or
2018, you're talking about.
Yes.
That.
Or they'll do things to make sure that the Jews remain a majority. They could do all sorts of things. One of the things they could do is convert non-Jews and call them Jews. Like, this is part of the fight between the Orthodox and the Zionists in Israel regarding who is a Jew. They have all sorts of laws about law of return, conversions that would not be valid according to Orthodox law. And because there's no separation of church and state, the Orthodox chief rabbinate, which, like in England, that's where the Israelis got it from, by the way. In England, there's no separation of church and state.
Right.
So the chief rabbi of England is an employee of the government. In America, you can't do that. There's no chief rabbi of America. America can't employ a chief rabbi because of separation of church and state. Yeah. You have a Church of England officially. I know they give freedom of religion, but there isn't officially a Church of England, and that's why and that's why Israel, in mandatory Palestine, they took that idea of chief rabbis who were elected by mandatory Britain. They were employees, actually, of mandatory Britain. In any case, the idea of self-determination in Israel is exclusive to the Jews by law.
And you're quoting the 2018...
2018 and the 1953, all of these are combined. And therefore, if you want to understand so many things about Israel, this explains it. One, you want to know why they're not annexing West Bank, Gaza?
One second. Sorry, because we can come to that. I just want to clarify this. You're talking about this 2018 nation-state law and how it says the right of Jews for self-determination in Israel. As it stands, there is no difference between, the rights of a Jew or a non-Jew to, form a government or be a member of the Knesset and so on, right? As it stands.
As it stands, officially according to law.
That 2018...
no, that still remains. As long as the non-Jews are minority...
But does it state that explicitly?
Well, that's what it says. It says that
as long as the non-Jews are a minority,
it says that they have no right to self-determination. That's what it means. They have no right to govern themselves.
What does it say verbatim?
Gotta look it up, but I'll tell you.
My point is, if it states... Jews have a right to self-determination. That's one thing.
No.
If it says only Jews...
have a right to is exclusive. That's the word. That is exclusive to the Jews. The right to self-determination is exclusive to the Jews in the state of Israel. Self-determination in the state of Israel is exclusive to the Jews.
That's what it states.
Yes, and it is the nation-state of the Jewish people. Now, I have over here, in front of me, the Jewish Agency, which is one of the arms of the Zionist movement, for all de facto government arm. They give out reports about Zionism and how to make people into Zionists and how to make Israel stronger and more Zionistic all the time. And I have the 2018 report in front of me. And it talks about the nation-state law and world Jewry. This is a report. The nation-state law has provoked different reactions among the Jewish community leaders and activists outside of Israel. ... They fear the demotion of the Arabic language from official to special status. That was one of the things they did. Arabic was an official language of Israel. Now it's not. Only Hebrew is the official language. Arabic has like a special status. That's, yes, ambiguous and purposely so, erodes the principles of equality and pluralism and weakens Israel's democratic character. In addition, there is worry throughout the diaspora that the nation-state legislation further damages Israel's image internationally. The law is seen as a wedge that will widen the rift between diaspora Jewry and the State of Israel and make it harder to defend Israel against the hostile and defamatory forces of delegitimization. Some contend that the law will likely be detrimental to the future of the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians. Proponents of the law emphasize that it is an expression of the continuity of the connection between the Jewish people and the State of Israel and represents an essential public declaration that Israel is the nation-state of the Jewish people. Then that's the nation-state law. The State of Israel is different than all other countries in the world in this, that Italy, you have to have some connection with Italy to be an Italian national or an Italian ethnic or an Italian citizen, whatever. You do not have to have any connection with Israel, with the State of Israel, to be a national of Israel, meaning you have the right to return, Israel's your country. Now I don't have a right to vote. The Turks who are in Germany have a right to vote in the Turkish election. But I don't have a right to vote in Israeli elections, which means that Israel expects stuff of me, as you saw in their law. They expect things of me, but
the 53
I don't have a right to vote.
I thought that was just a suggestion.
No, that's a law.
Is that a law that they uphold now? But that was an opinion you gave of someone who said that, you know, he expects Israel.
No, that's a status law. That's expectations. You're right. That's one of the problems. Their nation-state law that says that they are the nation-state of the Jews affects millions of people over whom Israeli law has no jurisdiction,
right?
Meaning the Jews. And you're right, when they say they expect the Jews, it's exactly it. They're not acting like Israel. This is what everybody needs to know. And everybody talks about one state, two state, red state, blue state, and they're missing really where the issue lies. The root of the issue is this. It's the citizenship structure and the nationality structure of Israel as the state of the Jews versus Israel as the state of the Israelis. Now, Israel has been sued by its various citizens, has been brought to court a number of times because they want an Israeli nationality. Okay? And I have over here the transcripts of and description of the Supreme Court of Israel's 2008, I think this was.
Okay.
Yeah, July 2008, in the Supreme Court sitting as a court of appeals. 3 judges, Judge Grunis, Meltzer, and Vogelman. Vogelman just retired recently. The appellants, a list of 21 appellants that came to sue Israel, and they said, we want an Israeli nationality.
Are these Arabs, presumably? Or?
No. Were there Arabs?
Just wondering what the...
Uzi Ornan, Uri Avneri, Itamar Even Zohar, sounds like Joseph Agassi, he could be an Arab perhaps, Yehudit Buber Agassi, so that sounds Jewish, because Yehudis does. Yeah, it's Shalamet Aloni, she was a Knesset. Yosef Barnea, this is Ibrahim Douiri.
Okay,
Ibrahim is Arabic. Yuval Halpern, Ofra Yeshua Lith, Yeshua Sobel.
I'm just wondering if these they're Jews, what are their, perhaps I'm just wondering if they're Jews, why would they go to the court? It doesn't really affect them in a negative way, does it? If they're Jews that live inside of Israel and they want an Israeli identity.
Well, first of all, even though this is before the nation-state law, when they made this nation-state law, the nation-state law, as if you remember, people were saying this is only formality, everybody knows this is like, this was the way Israel was established. And it's true, that's what it was. But if what the JPPI is saying in the name of many Israelis is correct, that this nation-state law, meaning, forget the law itself, we're talking about the idea that Israel's the state of the Jews and not the state of the citizens, is a impediment to the peace process, then that would be a reason for all Jews to want to sue Israel. I want Israel to become Israel and not the state of the Jews. It only causes me trouble. Why in the world would I want Israel I would be one of these people. But listen to this, because first of all, I disagree with Israel's whole interpretation, definition of Jewishness.
Right.
Secondly, I'll show you more reasons why Jews get blamed for what Israel does.
Yeah,
Everybody
I
knows
think
that.
that's probably a big one, right?
That's a big one right there. But listen to what the Israeli court said, okay? The appellants argue, for example, and this is a good argument, quote, "It is impossible to define the whole of world Jewry as belonging to the Jewish nation. For the Jews are all of the nationality of the states of which they are citizens." I agree with that. "We are dealing with an issue that is sensitive and controversial on the moral and historical level, one which has been accompanying the Jewish people for many years," I mean since Zionism,
Right.
"and the Zionist movement from its inception." Now here's the money quote. "The conception that Judaism is not only a religious affiliation, but also a national affiliation is the foundation stone of Zionism." That's Zionism. You want to do a favor for all the Jews and all the non-Jews in Israel, get rid of Zionism. This foundation stone, this idea that the Jews are a nationality and Israel is the state of the nationality, make Israel normal like all other countries. Not only is the Jews are a nationality, but listen, how do you become that nationality? How do you become a member? Religious conversion by somebody that doesn't even believe in the nationality. But we're not done. If you're born to this nationality, you're a Jew, even if you're an atheist. A religious conversion brings you into this nationality, but an atheist is also part of the nationality. But if you're born into this nationality and you don't become an atheist, you believe in Jesus as the Messiah, you believe Muhammad is the last prophet, you're not Jewish anymore. You're not entitled to the law of return.
So if you converted, you're not allowed to...
Yes, the Israeli Supreme Court had a case. There was actually a guy, Polish guy, Daniel Refusion. He was born Jewish. He was no anti-Semite. He helped a lot of Jews escape in World War II because he became a Carmelite monk. And because of his status as a Christian, he was able to help Jews escape from the Nazis. And he wanted to come to Israel based on the law of return. They said, no, you're not Jewish. You're Christian. So listen to this.
Yeah.
So let's say Daniel, brother Daniel, Oswald Refusion was his original name.
Okay.
Let's say Oswald or Daniel, brother Daniel, would come and say, you know what? Fine, no problem. Guess what? I don't believe in Jesus anymore. I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
Now you're Jewish. Now you're an atheist. Now you're Jewish. Now you can come. Now you can come on the law of return. Wait, but I have a friend, a guy who also wants to come. I met him in the monastery. He's Christian. He can't come. He's not law of return. He's not Jewish. Now, by the way, he was allowed to come in because non-Jews are allowed to come in by the process of naturalization.
Right.
But that's based on if Israel wants them. All Jews are guaranteed a place in Israel based on the law of return. But now listen to this. Thought experiment. Brother Daniel has a friend who he met in the monastery. And friend also wants to come to, oh, you're Christian, you're not law of return, you're not qualified. Okay, fine, I'll be an atheist. Like Brother Daniel became an atheist. He became a Jew because he's an atheist. Oh, but you weren't born Jewish. He was born Jewish and he's an atheist, so he can. If you're born Jewish and you're an atheist, you can. But if you're born an atheist, became Christian, and then became an atheist again, then you can't. Okay, fine. I'll convert to Judaism. Fine, go to a rabbi. The state of Israel won't convert you. The state of Israel appointed rabbis can, but you need a rabbi. There's no naturalization process to become Jewish the way there is to become an Italian or an American or a Mexican. So go to a rabbi. Rabbi says, okay, you have to be religious. Orthodox rabbi. I don't want to be religious. I want to be like Ben Gurion. I want to be a Jew like Ben Gurion. I want to be a Jew like Benjamin Netanyahu. He's my role model. I want to be a Jew just like him. Nope, sorry, you want to convert, you have to be religious. He was born Jewish, so he doesn't have to be religious.
Right.
None of this makes any sense.
It's not coherent.
Why? It's not coherent. Why? Because there was a definition of a Jew. The Zionists wanted to change it. But they wanted to change the definition of a Jew and still retain the Jewish people with the new definition. And you can't retain a table and define it as a fish because you're going to get contradictions. You cannot retain the Jewish people the way we understand the Jewish people and and change their definition to a nationality, because they don't look at themselves as a nationality. They're not treated it. They don't treat themselves as a nationality. The in-group and out-group is not looked upon as nationalities are. But the state of Israel says, no, you're a nationality, and we are your state.
Okay.
Okay, so they decided, no, you can't do it. Now, they also said, listen to this, nota bene, in the Israeli Supreme Court case. A person cannot belong to two nations. If an Israeli nationality is to be recognized, the members of the Jewish nation in Israel will have to choose between two options, whether they are Israeli, and then they will not be Jewish, or whether they are Jewish, and then they will not be Israeli. The same applies to members of other minority groups. Okay, so there's a disagreement about this, but let's say you can only have one nationality. You could be a citizen, dual citizen, but one nationality. Tell me, if that's true, is my nationality Jewish, or is my nationality American? Or Polish, my family's from Poland. However you want to define nationality.
Well, you haven't agreed to, you haven't signed up to the...
But that doesn't matter. They claim that all the Jews are a nationality, and they are the state of that nationality.
They might say that, but a lot of people say things. You live here, you're an American citizen.
So in other words, I could say that what they're saying is bogus. But according to the Zionist conception of Judaism, am I a Jewish national or am I an American national? Now let me tell you where it comes into play. You think this doesn't affect me? It affects me.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't affect you.
No, much more directly than you may think.
Okay.
Now I'm holding a book called A Place Among the Nations by Benjamin...
Cover that face up. Yeah, we don't...
By Benjamin Netanyahu, A Place Among the Nations. And now you understand what the title means. Now the Jews have a place among the nations.
Right.
Okay. Question, is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism? So you can debate this all you want. One of the Zionist propaganda strategies is to get people to debate things and discuss things for all sorts of reasons that are all nonsense.
Okay.
But they have a real reason. And they want President Trump, our Congress, whoever, to declare, the EU, whoever they want to declare that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, because the end game of Zionism is to subsume Jewish identity into Israeli, is to make that real Jewish nationality, to redefine what a Jew is. And now, let me tell, it's not I'm talking, Benjamin Netanyahu is talking. And he's going to tell me in a moment, why anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Listen to this. I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti-Zionist is the equivalent of, I'm not anti-American, I just think the United States shouldn't exist. In other words, you cannot be against the existence of a French national identity and say I'm pro-French people. You cannot say I'm against an American national identity. That's what he says. I'm against I think the United States of America should not exist, but I'm not anti-American.
He's not talking about an American nationality. He's on about a state.
Oh, but don't forget, Israel is the state of the Jewish nationality. You see, yes, it's true. What he should have said here is, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti-Zionist. Well, I'm not anti-American, I just think the United States should not exist, is the same as saying, I'm not anti-Israel, I just think the state of Israel should not exist. But he says, it's the equivalent of saying, I'm not anti-Jewish, I just think the state of Israel should not exist. You see what they're doing. Now, I'm going to give you an even more explicit formulation of that formula.
I think there's a bit of an issue with just semantics again, because a Semite also does include Arabs,
yeah, it's
right?
true. You're right about that.
And anti-Semitism is used colloquially.
No, you're right about that. But let's assume that anti-Semitism colloquially means, in what he's saying, anti-Jew. He's talking about anti-Semitism meaning anti-Jew hate. That's what he's talking about. And yes, it's technically not the literal translation of the word, but we'll say as if, in a manner of speaking, anti-Semitism, okay? What is a Jewish state, according to Israel? A state for the Jews, of the Jews, by the Jews, with the majority of Jews. So we'll go to Israel's own website, the government website, And we have an article by Avigdor Lieberman. Then he was Minister for Foreign Affairs, but it's still on the website. Now it's the Israel's, I think, in the embassy website. The meaning of Israel as the state of the Jewish people. The term Jewish state refers primarily to nationality. Since their emergence in antiquity, the Jewish people have constituted a nation, a people, and a civilization, anchored in basic aspects of their identity, such as Judaism and the Hebrew language. Now, here's the money quote. Now, until this is not true, what he said. Israel is to the Jewish people what France is to the French people, Ireland is to the Irish people, and Japan is to the Japanese. That's Zionism. Without Zionism, Israel is to the Israeli people what Japan is to the Japanese people, and France is to the French. With Zionism, Jews are a nationality, and Israel is the state of that nationality. And only Jews have the right to self-determination in Israel. Israel is the product, the work product of all the Jewish people. It is not the state of the Israeli citizens. It is the state of the Jewish nationality. And France is to the French people what Israel is to the Jewish people. Jewish people are a nationality, and that's what a Jewish state means.
Right.
That's Zionism. Everything else that you hear being debated about, look, there are debates and there are discussions, I understand, about discussions about Israel's behavior and Israel's actions and stuff like that. But that is not the crux of the matter. All of these things, the motive behind all of this, when we say Zionism, it's not settler colonialism. Settler colonialism was the mechanism to bring Zionism to fruition. But Zionism at its root is this, the belief that the Jews are a nationality and Israel is the nation state of that nationality. It's not me talking, it's their Supreme Court talking. That is the foundation stone of Zionism. That the Jewish is not merely a religious identity, it's a national identity. Now, they still haven't explained what a nationality is. So that's why the Zionists made a Jewish flag before they had an Israeli flag before they had Israel.
Right.
Because the Jews never had a flag. We had tribes, but the Jews weren't a tribe. We were a religion, a family, a religion that consisted of the various tribes. And the tribes were families and they had their own flag, but the Jews weren't. The Jews didn't have a language. The European Jews spoke Yiddish. Spanish Jews spoke something called Ladino.
Right.
The Arabic Jews spoke Arabic. I told you I have these Syrian Orthodox friends. No, the Jews need a language because language is something that unites Jews. So we're going to invent modern Hebrew. And I say invent, not resurrect, because they changed the language in order to change the concept, the spiritual concepts that we have into nationalist modern concepts. Teku is not a rabbinic quandary. It's a tie in a soccer game. Kavyochel is not a way to describe God's attributes. It means, as if. Agoda is not ethical stories of righteous people, but rather a fairy tale. And that's separated grandparents from their grandchildren. They changed their accent of the Jews. They started speaking with a Middle Eastern accent. Guys like Ben Gurion, guys like Netanyahu, these are Europeans, but they made the Israeli accent a Middle Eastern accent. They changed their names to Middle Eastern sounding names, right? And Netanyahu is not his real name. It's Mileikowsky, and Ben Gurion is Green or Grun, depending upon how you pronounce, the U with the two dots on top.
Right.
So that is Zionism, and that is a liability to everybody. Nobody gains by Zionism. This idea that you want to solve the problem? You want to solve the problem with the Palestinians? You want to solve all of this? It's very simple. Get rid of Zionism. Take the Supreme Court, bring the case again, and that is the difference between the judges, the 2018 nation-state law, the Brother Daniel law, all of these laws, the idea that Israel is the state of the Jewish nationality. Change that. It's all based on a philosophy of Zionism, and it's baked into the laws. And they have to have now a Jewish majority. They can't. Now, that's Zionism at its core. How to dismantle it? You don't have to shoot one bullet in order to do this. Not one. Zionism is, you know what kiting checks is?
No.
He used to be, when I was younger, you were able to commit this crime. But now they really can't.
Oh.
Here's how they would do it. Let's say I have no money in the bank, right? And I want to show that I'm a millionaire.
Right.
So I write a check from bank A to bank B. I have 2 accounts for $1 million. And before the check bounces, before it clears, I write a check from bank C to bank A. And I keep writing checks so they think I have $1 million and I have to keep doing it forever.
Yeah.
But if I miss one, it's called kiting checks.
Okay.
Israel's
kiting
checks.
Sorry, yeah.
The existence of the state of Israel, this whole nationality, it's all kiting checks. It's an
definition
illusion
of what a Jew is.
But they did more. It's the definition of what a Jew is, the definition of what Israel is in relationship to those fictitious Jews, and the history of the Jewish people in relation to the current fictitious Jewish nation and its current fictitious Jewish state. The idea that Jews always wanted to go to Israel next year in Jerusalem. That was not talking about self-determination like Netanyahu, like Israel did. It's talking about a messianic renewal of the world, the Messiah coming and God coming down. And ki lecha sichra kol berach tishava kol loshoin. We say in our prayers 3 times a day, which is based on a verse in Divrei HaYomim Chronicles, that the day where everybody will will sense God openly, and they'll bow to God, and religion will take over the world because God will be there. The non-Jews will learn Torah from the Messiah.
Right.
Yes, that's what it says.
It's all religious is what you're saying.
It's all religious. There is nothing, but here's what they did. So they changed these religious things. They took the symbols and they made them national symbols. They invented a flag. They invented a language. They invented a nationality. Then they made a country and they said this is the country of the nationality. Now, how do they sell this? That's another story with the fear-mongering. Okay, so you're not a Zionist, you don't believe in Zionism, but if you don't support Israel, and if you don't relate to Israel, and if you don't stand with Israel, and if you don't agree with everything Israel does, then the crazy Islamists, the jihadists are going to take over the world. They want to change the world order. And there are neighborhoods in England, I'm sure you've heard this, that the police are scared to walk into because of Sharia law runs the neighborhoods. You've heard that?
I think there was a paper that said something stupid. I think Fox News might have said it. Yeah.
Okay, whatever. But you see, this is it. And everybody knows this because Fox News said it, or wherever you got it from. I heard it also from many people. Somebody just recently told me this. And
someone recently told you that?
Yes. And
told you what specifically?
That the
police are afraid.
Whole business with Israel and the Palestinians is a microcosm of a fight against to create a new world order to implement a caliphate, Muslim caliphate all over the world. And like, for example, all these immigrants into Europe that are changing the culture of Europe. And one of the examples, I said, where in the world are you getting this from? And this is the best, quote unquote, best example he had. That that in London there are neighborhoods, or England, he said, I don't remember exactly, that there are neighborhoods that you can't walk in. Sharia law runs the place. The police don't even have power over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it's a long,
so this is the idea. Look, you remember there was a Zionist, an Israeli politician, I think it was the assistant mayor of Jerusalem, a woman, I forgot her name, who said that mentioned her that they bombed a church in Gaza. She said, no churches in Gaza.
There are no churches in Gaza, so I'm not quite sure where the report is talking about.
There's a Catholic church in there, isn't there? That is.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are no Christians because they were driven out by.
Well, there are Christians because I spoke to an MP yesterday who has family members in the church who are Christians.
Of course, because the jihadists kicked out all the Christians, and they're all, when I tell people that Yasser Arafat was not religious, people don't believe me. What do you mean? He was a jihadist. He was a terrorist. That means he was like ISIS. He wanted to create a caliphate all over the world.
Oh, this is just stupid propaganda.
But.
I mean, even if you take Hamas, they are a mile removed from like ISIS. Do you know what I mean?
Right. But
I mean, this is a very much a Not entirely, but largely a national sort of.
I understand that.
ISIS is a different kettle of fish.
I understand all of this perfectly, but this is not the message that the average person in the United States of America gets.
Why is that,
watches the media. Why? It's part of the propaganda. Listen, from the Muslims were portrayed from long ago here in the United States of America, especially in regard to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Look, Leon Uris's book Exodus, which later became a movie, portrayed, Ben-Gurion said it was like the best propaganda for Israel. That was a fiction story, but it was about the Israelis and the Palestinians in the conflict. And the Israelis were tall, Aryan type. I think it was Paul Newman who played Yair Ben Ami or something like that. I forgot the guy's name, like the star of the show. And the women were like American women, not Middle Eastern. And the Muslims or the Arabs or the Palestinians, they were all, like caricatures. Right. When I tell people that a lot of mathematics and science was invented by the Muslims and about their philosophers, that I don't know anything about Islam. I have not studied Islam. I am a complete ignoramus where it comes to Islam. I know no more than the next guy. But studying Jewish books, I know that they quote Maimonides, Rabbi Chesdoi Kreshkash, the Ralbag, and others, Ibn Rushd, Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi, Al-Ghazali, and others. I know about the differences in the first cause dependency argument for God's existence, which is in every single, I say this without reservation, every single, from the Middle Ages, Jewish philosophy book that discusses God. They adapted it and use it differently, but there are different variations of the arguments. But people don't believe me. Muslims, what do you mean? They want to blow up the world. And
you attribute this down to Israel?
I don't know. I never really studied it, but this for sure. You know what? I'll give you a very good example. Okay. A very good example of this. But I need my phone. I mean, there are nationalist terrorists, there are religious terrorists, and people just mix them all up. Every Muslim in the street is people think they're terrorists.
Is that what they think around here?
Around here, I'm not necessarily around here, but in a lot of places.
I don't know. It's a bit of a generalization, but I know...
It is a generalization. I'm not defending it. What I'm saying is...
No, I'm saying just the fact that everyone thinks that. I'm not sure...
Not everyone.
I'm not sure how common
it doesn't matter if it's very common or only fairly common. That's just a question of how messed up the idea is. But the fact that it's even fairly common is a problem. Okay, now you want an example of this.
Okay.
Now, an example of the blending of the... See, Israel wants to change Jewish identity into a nationalist, ethnocentric, now a very right-wing identity. Left-wing Zionism kind of failed, and it doesn't really have solutions. We could discuss that if you want. But here's an example. I'm playing you now a 41-second clip of Steve Bannon.
Okay.
This is just on Israeli television, it looks like, yesterday. And he's discussing, in his 41 seconds, who is the biggest enemy of Israel. He's talking to Israelis. Who's the biggest enemy? Listen.
People in Israel got to understand something. The number one enemy to the people in Israel are American Jews that do not support Israel and do not support MAGA. Okay, MAGA and the evangelical Christians and the traditional Catholics in this country have Israel's back. They have the Jews' back. The biggest single enemy to the Jewish people are not the Islamic supremacists. The biggest enemy you have is inside the wire. Progressive Jewish billionaires that are funding all this stuff. They are the number one enemy, and the people in Israel have to set that right. because MAGA has your back, traditional Catholics have your back, and evangelical Christians have your back. We will always have the back of Israel. But I got to tell you, you have an enemy inside the wire.
That's it. So the Jews that are not Zionists are the biggest enemy of Israel. MAGA is the friends of Israel. The evangelicals got Israel's back. The traditional Christians, Catholics, have Israel's back. The enemy and Israel needs to know that this is the biggest enemy, are the or anti-Zionist Jews in America that don't support Israel. Now, we're not done.
Billionaires.
Now, you want to know who...
Those of influence he's talking about, isn't he?
Well...
You said the billionaires, right?
Yes, the billionaires are obviously the most dangerous, but if you're not a billionaire, you're not as dangerous, but you're still ideologically the big enemy. Now, now that you brought that up about who exactly we're talking about, is it only the billionaires or the people of influence? I'll play you another clip. This is Deborah Lipstadt. You know Deborah Lipstadt is? Deborah Lipstadt is was appointed by President Trump as the ambassador of America against anti-Semitism. She was on a podcast being interviewed by Peter Beinart.
Okay.
A left-wing Zionist, one of the very left-wing Zionist Jews. He doesn't believe in a Jewish state. It's a long story.
Okay.
But she's on his podcast. He does believe in a Jewish state as a place of refuge, but not as a nationalist thing. Two-state solution, one of the left-wing Zionists.
Right, I'm with you.
And he's interviewing her. Liberal
Zionists.
Yes. And she's saying to him about how anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
Yep.
And the question that she's going to bring up before he does, she says, is what about the Satmar Hasidim, the ultra-Orthodox Jews in America and in Israel, who are anti-Zionist? Are they anti-Semites too?
Right.
Now, they're anti-Semites for religious reasons. They're not involved at all in the politics of Israel. Israel's to them like China.
Right.
Israel's to me like China. But first of all, they believe that being Jewish is a religion, just like I described.
Yeah.
And what does Israel have to do with them? Plus, also, they believe that the mainstream Orthodox Jews, as opposed to modern Orthodox Jews. There's modern Orthodox Jews, which are like Zionist Orthodox, the ones that are selling land, and the ones with the Israeli flags in their synagogues.
Right.
Only modern Orthodox places you'll find with Israeli flags in the synagogues. Regular Orthodox, or you can call them traditional Orthodox.
Ultra-Orthodox, where does that
And
ultra-Orthodox
are certainly not Zionists, anti-Zionists.
Where does ultra-Orthodox fit into this?
These descriptions are not actual categories.
Right,
They're
okay.
approximations.
Just I've heard you use, Orthodox.
Orthodox. Right, but
it seems like interchangeably a bit.
Sometimes it is. And I'll give you an example where interchangeability of the terms sometimes confuses people.
Yeah.
But the reason I mention is because of her.
Yeah.
So, are they anti-Semites? It would be crazy to say they are, right?
Well, wouldn't surprise me.
So listen to this.
Yeah.
Now, there's always the ringer, which I'll mention now because if I don't, you will. People like Satmar, the Satmar Hasidim, who have amongst that Neturei Karta comes out of there, and within Neturei Karta, there's the crazies who love to show up, at Palestinian demonstrations and Holocaust denial.
Sure.
A group of them attended the Holocaust denial conferences in Iran, et cetera, et cetera. Are they anti-Semites? Well, I think the jury is a little bit out on that.
You hear this? The jury's a little bit out on that. If Satmar Hasidim, not even, first of all, she's wrong. Neturei Karta is not an offshoot of Satmar. It's not. And it's not, whatever. But
she's talking about anti-Zionist.
She's just wrong, yeah. But Satmar Hasidim don't even go to the Palestinian protests because they have nothing to do with Israel and Palestine anymore. I explained this to you. Then they have to do with Russia and Ukraine. They're Americans. They're from Hungary. My family's from Poland, but they're mostly from Hungary, Romania. And the grandparents, and they have nothing to do with Israeli politics. Israel is a identity thief, claiming it's the Jewish state. They laugh at that, they mock that. They don't vote in the Israeli elections because they believe that the difference between them and other Orthodox Jews, they all both agree that it's prohibited technically according to Jewish law to have a state of Israel. But now the question is, again, this is
What you mean by state?
sovereignty.
Okay.
Jews before the Messiah comes. But now the question is, when you say you can't have a state, does that mean you can't be part of that state that already exists?
Right.
Because look, if there wouldn't be any, and especially in a democracy, who really is the state? When you say a state can't exist, what do you mean? The government? Well, in a democracy, the voters are the government. In a way,
Or the reflection.
a reflection, not just a reflection. They hire the government, or they choose the government, right? Not just a reflection. On the contrary, the government is a reflection. The government is a reflection of the voters,
That's what I
right?
meant,
Okay.
yeah.
So they say because it's prohibited to have a Jewish state, it's prohibited to vote or to be a member of the government in the Jewish state. Other Orthodox Jews say, yes, it's prohibited to have a Jewish state, but look, if you don't vote, it's going to be there anyway. So your voting is not contributing to the existence of a Jewish state. And your being in the government is not contributing to the existence of the Jewish state. And then the Satmar rabbi would say, yes, but this is also one of those things that is dependent upon the rabbinic scholarship.
Right,
A disagreement involved. What if, let's say, give you theoretical, what if there are, if you try to bring false testimony and falsely say that somebody's a murderer, right?
Right.
And there are 10 witnesses, and the 10 witnesses falsely accuse this guy. And they already had, let's say, 9 witnesses. And the guy was already going to be guilty. The 10th witness, he comes. Can you punish him? Can you say he was also a murderer? Without him, he would have gotten killed anyway. So he's a fifth wheel to the wagon, or do you say no, that he's part of the conspiracy and he gets punished as well? This, by the way, this type of thing is relevant to the question of whether you're allowed to vote in the Israeli government, in a government that's not allowed to exist, but without you, it would also exist. In addition, there's a difference between Zionism and the Israeli government. For example, there are Arab parties now, well, there were, in the Israeli government. That doesn't make them Zionists. On the contrary, they're there to protect the interests of the anti-Zionist Arab community from the Zionists. And the Haredim in the Israeli government are there officially in the same manner, similar way, to protect, not because they're Zionists, because they need to protect the religious rights of the Orthodox Jews against the Zionist government. So they say, we're not here because of Zionism, we're here because we're against Zionism. And the other side says, yes, but you're not allowed to be part of the government. Yes, but the government would exist without us. And this is it's
out of necessity. It's almost bred from necessity. Because if they shouldn't be involved, but if they weren't involved, they would suffer further.
So that's a question for rabbinic scholars to decide.
Sorry, I'm not giving the verdict.
No, I know, but I'm saying that it's not a question. Right, and there's, of course, the idea that, well, if you join the government, there's Zionist influence, and there's money, and all sorts of complicated... You open yourself up to these things. But that's what Deborah Lipstadt says. If these Satmar Chassidim are anti-Semites, the jury's a little bit out on that. And then she says...
though, if you say it to, people, it does complicate the matter, but I think it's an exception, which doesn't prove the rule.
So it could be it's an exception. Could be the jury's out on that. Could be I'm an anti-Semite. Well, if you say you don't believe in Israel as the state of the Jewish people, you heard what Netanyahu said. It's like saying the Jewish people shouldn't exist. If you don't believe in Israel as the Jewish state, you don't believe in the Jewish people, because it's like saying, I don't believe in France, but you do believe in the French people. It's not possible. The Zionism is not a behavior, it's a philosophy.
Right.
The behavior is a result of the philosophy. And the philosophy is undergirded by the fear-mongering of the jihadists and the Caliphate people, and of course the Holocaust people coming back, and all of it is the same, because the Palestinians are the same as Hitler, and Hitler is the same as ISIS, and ISIS is the same as Hamas, and Hamas is, and everything is one big mix. And it's the fear-mongering. And that's why Holocaust studies, a funny thing, people think that we discussed this, that Holocaust studies are like natural, just Jews being Jews, because the Holocaust was a big thing. It's not true. It's synthetically induced to create this PTSD, this paranoia of Hitler is around every corner. And of course, the Holocaust can happen. But that it should be front and center of your mind. And don't forget, according to Herzl and Zionists like him, it's actually their identity. So the Holocaust...
it's a defining factor of it.
The defining factor. That's what makes Jews Jews, right? So it's front and center of the identity of these guys. And it's designed for that. A Hasidic guy, ultra-Orthodox, you asked me what that is, they lead very sheltered, insular lives. English is not their first language. They speak Yiddish at home, most of them.
In the US and so on?
In the US, yes. In the US, there are many of them. There are very large, beautiful communities. They, have businesses and work, and some of them are actually very affluent. But as far as culture is concerned, I say, the American culture, they're not the American culture. They're the Hungarian culture and their own culture.
Right.
The Hungarian Jewish, of course, America seeps in a bit, but they're very insular. And one of these guys asked me, by the regular Orthodox, he used a different term, but he meant people like me. What is this thing with the Holocaust that's so big? Because by Hasidim, he meant these ultra-Orthodox, by us, it's not a big thing, the Holocaust. Is it like a different segment of Jewry, like a different denomination where the Holocaust... I said, no, it's a Zionist thing. So really? I said, yeah, no. It was it's not by all Jews, by the most sheltered Jewish communities are the most anti-Zionist. See, that shows that Zionism is not really part of Judaism, because the more assimilated, let's take the Orthodox, the more assimilated Orthodox Jews, the ones that are more modern, the ones where they go to college and graduate school and they watch television and, the boys and girls hang out in the pizza store, the very liberal, they're all Zionist. All Zionists. It's very hard to find somebody that's not. Peter Beinart is a minority, but it's very, very hard to find someone that's not. They're very Zionist. They're the most Zionist of all Zionists. Then you have the Satmar Chassidim, that are the most insular, or they're the Hungarian, Romanian, amongst the Lithuanian, also the more insular groups are the most anti-Zionist. The more modern a person is, the more inclined he is to be Zionist amongst the Orthodox.
Or the least religious, the less religious, or irreligious.
Right, now the irreligious is different. You see, irreligious has an inclination not to be Zionist at all, because they're less inclined to attach to the Jewish symbols and the Jewish meaningfulness that Zionism claims they represent. Zionism took the Jewish symbols and the Holy Lands, made it into a national homeland. And the reason why they did that, they could have had Uganda, Kenya, and it was a largely uninhabited part of it, right? Whenever I say this, people say, well, what's the difference there? It was largely uninhabited. But they chose the Holy Land because they wanted to masquerade. They wanted to create this whole fake Jewish narrative and this fake Jewish identity. There was a group of pseudo-Zionists called the Canaanim that actually wanted to make a new identity.
Let's jump to the modern day, though. They have the state now, essentially, don't they? So what do you propose, essentially, is what I'm asking here. Because you've laid out quite the argument for why the two, Judaism and Zionism, are totally different. Zionism being part and parcel of Israel and its governance, shall we say, Well, what's your proposal to... So your issue, correct me if I'm wrong, essentially is, one, Israel claims to represent world Jewry, right? And you didn't sign up for that as a Jew.
I didn't sign up for that.
Two, Israel internally, it discriminates and it puts Jews... only Jews have the right to self-determination.
When you say my issues, there are two things that should not be confused. There's a country called Israel, and there's an ideology called Zionism.
But the country
There's
works off of this ideology.
right. The country is run based on the ideology, but you can have the ideology without the country. There were Zionists who didn't want a country,
Yeah.
right? In fact, I think it was 1904, Israel Zangwill, if memory serves, wrote an article there
Right.
in which he said, Israel Zangwill is one of the founding fathers of Zionism, actually, and he had said, better Zionism without Zion than Zion without Zionism.
Right.
Better have the ideology and the nationalism, even if you like the Kurds, let's say, cultural Zionism or something like that, that the Jews should become a culture and have a flag rather than have a state without Zionism. So as far as Israel's concerned, to me, Israel's relationship to me is the same as Uganda's relationship to me.
Let's
It's
say
the same as China's relationship to me.
Well, let's say they implemented that. They now no longer represent all Jews.
Who do they represent?
Well, let's just strip that layer back.
No, you
first.
see that's you can't. You can't. That's everything I'm saying. It's all based on all the issues that people have with Israel are all based on one philosophy. Israel is the nation state of the Jewish nationality. Now, what's packed into there is, like I said, it's all smoke and mirrors. It's a fake nationality, a unilateral declaration that you're a state of people that have nothing to do with you, a nationality that the only way you could become part of this nationality is by a religious conversion to a religion that the prime minister and the founding fathers of Zionism don't even believe in. Judaism, they're not observant Jews. And you're born into it, but if you practice another religion, you're not even a national. And 1,000 years, for 1,000 generations, you could be an Israeli and do all the Zionist things. But if you're not Jewish, it's still not, you have no self-determination rights. Zionism is inherently a self-contradictory, nonsensical ideology. And it's not a question of good or bad. It's not. Look, far be it from me to tell the Palestinians, what strategy they should take to get their own state or whatever it is. However, just as there are many Jewish people that are looking at the media and they think they understand what Zionism is and what the issues are and what the choices are regarding what to do about, the Palestinians also don't understand. Like the Jews don't understand. The Palestinians, now, I'm not saying everybody, but the ones who learn about Palestinians from the media, I do know that many of them do understand there's a difference between Judaism and Zionism.
Right.
But what they don't understand, and it's not, I'm saying they as opposed to the French don't get it. Many Jews don't get it. They don't understand what Zionism is. Zionism is not a certain behavior. Zionism is a fake ideology of Israel being the state of a non-existent nationality as opposed to the state of Israelis. It's not white supremacy. It's not Jewish supremacy. It's not. You know why? Even if you're going to come to me, and you will be able to, that Israel discriminates in favor of Jews.
Yeah.
They do.
With villages and where you can live. And
All of that is true. And I'm not even talking in West Bank. I'm talking in Israel proper.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
The level of
To
unfairness,
preserve its Jewishness.
the level of unfairness is different in the West Bank.
Yeah.
It was military law and all sorts of, and that's a problem. But to understand the problem, we have a very important saying amongst our sages. A good question is half the answer. You have to know what the question is.
Right.
What really is the problem?
And you think
The problem is not Jewish supremacy. I'll tell you
think people
why.
are missing the core
Oh,
question,
yes.
yeah.
So they think it's Jewish supremacy. Then there are those that are saying, because they're following the Talmud, and in the Talmud it says, all this is nonsense. And
It actually breeds anti-Semitism.
Of course it breeds. It's more. These are the anti-Semites. This business with the Talmud was a Christian, not a Muslim, a Christian type of anti-Semitism that goes back many years, because we all believe in the Bible, the Old Testament, right? What makes Jews Jews is, what makes our religion is our interpretation of the Bible and I guess, I'm not sure it's the same, but from my very minimal understanding of Islam, you have the Quran, then you have the Hadiths, and then, so the Quran isn't in itself the all of Islam, right? You have other parts too. This oral Torah, which is the Talmud is part, and it's that really what makes Judaism Judaism.
Right.
So if you want to attack Judaism, you can't attack the Old Testament. What are you going to attack? Because the Christians believe in the Old Testament. You're going to attack the Talmud, and you're going to all the anti-Semitic tropes that Jews eat blood of Christians, and that Christians or non-Jews are inhuman, which is all lies. This was all, in 1970, a PLO think tank came out with a document, which I have over here, that said to the Palestinians, don't dare, you should not take up this strategy, because it is anti-Semitic, it's nonsense. We looked into it, and don't do it. But then there's those that say that it's a Jewish supremacy or white supremacy, because that is the natural default path of least resistance to understanding an unfairness between Jews and non-Jews. That's not it.
Well, there can be multiple issues.
I
understand you're saying...
No, but let me tell you what the one issue is, which you don't need anything else to explain it.
Okay.
See, if it would be Jewish supremacy, so then Zionists outside of Israel would also believe that Jews are superior to non-Jews. And you don't find that outside of Israel.
No, but this is what I'm saying. It can be multiple things.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying it's less than this. This plus other things. But if there is a Jewish supremacy or something, it would exist outside of Israel as well among Zionists. And it doesn't. You don't have, except for support of Israel, there is no, like you have white supremacists that go around preaching white supremacy. The Jewish people, even the Zionists, don't go around saying Jews compared to non-Jews here in America, Christians or whatever they are. You don't find that type of talk. But I'll tell you what the problem is. Now that we understand what Zionism is, the problem is simple. You don't need to think about it. The problem is that in the United States of America, this is the country of the American citizens. Non-citizens have certain rights. But if America gives more rights to citizens, that's not American supremacy. It's not white supremacy if you have Mexican non-citizens. The country is for the American citizens. Italy is for the Italian citizens. Israel is for the Jewish nation. Israel, it's the citizenship structure. Israel to the Jews is like France to the French. That's what Netanyahu said. That's what Zionism is. So if you have French people in France, and you have other people who are not French citizens, right?
I want to hear what
you're going to
discriminate.
And therefore, that's really the problem. The problem is these 22 appellants were trying to solve the problem by making an Israeli nationality and not a Jewish nationality. I am trying to solve the problem by teaching people that this idea of a Jewish nationality and Israel being the state of that nationality, especially number two, is a Zionist invention. Once you understand the problem, then you'll be able to solve it. The problem is Zionism, the ideology, that the Jews are a nationality and the state of Israel is the state of that nationality. Once upon a time, the Zionists believed that all the Jews are going to move to Israel. And all Jews are going to identify as Zionists in Israel. Things didn't work out the way the Zionists thought, especially after 1967, when they captured big swaths of land with all of these millions of non-Jews. Now they have a problem.
Demographic problem.
A demographic problem. And why is the demographics a problem? Not because of white supremacy, not because of Jewish supremacy, because you saw their laws say, their ideology says, this is the country of the nation of the Jews. How are you going to... And yes, the nation-state law was only 2018, but it was just a formality.
The ideology
was always there. So if this is the country of the Jews, you could become a Jew, if you convert, It's weird. Zionism makes no sense. But if you accept the idea of a Jewish nationality, and you accept the idea that that there's such a thing as a nation state, then you can accept the idea that Israel is the country of the Jews. And now, yes, they should have just not taken the territory in 1967. They shouldn't have, and then things would be a lot better. But they did, and now they can't annex the people in the territories because you have this demographic problem. And the problem is not supremacy per se. The problem is not settler colonialism per se. Settler colonialism was a means to an end. The end was Zionism. A new Jewish identity. And it had to be in Palestine. It had to be in the Holy Land because it had to be a Jewish identity. It had to appeal to Jewish sentiments. They had to have the Jewish symbols because it was for the Jewish nationality. So now, how do you maintain a Jewish nationality? All the Palestinians can convert to Judaism, and then there will be no problem. Now, the Zionists won't let that happen because they'll just say it's insincere, the conversion. Yeah. It's not, if you have to be religious and you have to be a Jew. And besides, why should you give up your religion?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But you see what that is. In order to become a national of a democratic state, you have to convert to another religion, and the conversion will only be considered valid by the Israeli government because the Israeli government follows the Jewish rabbinic laws regarding conversions. You have to be an Orthodox Jew. Otherwise, you can't become a national of this nationality. Therein is where our efforts should be. Zionism is stupid. It's nonsensical. It's intellectually incoherent. The idea of it's an identity. It's an identity crisis, an identity theft. It's nonsensical, and the solution is very simple. If the Supreme Court of Israel would have ruled that there is such a thing as an Israeli nationality, one person, one vote. There's no more democracy. You don't need, and if they would rule not like Netanyahu, Avigdor Lieberman, that Israel is not the country of the Jewish nationality. Get rid of the nation-state law of 2018. Reverse it. The problem is not that Israel should not exist. The problem is it does not exist. It's only a doing business name. It's the state of the Jewish nationality. It's the Jewish nation state doing business as the state of Israel. And it gives people citizenship of the state of Israel. And their passport, it says your nationality is Israeli. So the world can see, Israel's a normal country. But it's not a normal country because there is no country where the nationality is similar to the Israeli nationality. That it is the nation state of people that have nothing to do with Israel, never had anything to do with the Israeli state. Never mind that in order to become part of this nationality, the only way to do it is by a religious conversion. And you have to believe in the religion. To a country where the prime minister doesn't believe in the religion. It's insane.
The laws are incoherent.
The ideology is incoherent, not the laws. The ideology of remember, they said that's the definition of a Jewish state.
Yeah.
The idea of a Jewish state is incoherent. It's not technical laws. These define what a Jewish state is.
Well, your solution would be to, accept an Israeli nationality and treat everyone essentially equally, and accept that you do not represent all world Jewry.
You only represent Israelis like any normal country.
Yeah. But that's the solution.
That's right.
But here's the thing with that. How would that stop? Okay, I hear what you're saying. It makes sense to me what you're saying. But that wouldn't stop the wars necessarily either, right?
Well,
that wouldn't stop the expansionist element.
Well,
necessarily.
Well, it depends what you mean by expansionist element. Currently, we're talking right now about Israel, Gaza, West Bank. If all of that would just be one country called Israel, and they can change the name. I don't care if they call it Israel or Herzlstan or Palestine. It makes no difference to me. Or Holy Land. That was my idea.
Yeah.
On another podcast, Holy Land, right? I don't care. Let the citizens decide what to call it. It makes no difference to me.
Okay.
One country. You know what? You want to know a real solution? Instead of Donald Trump buying Greenland or Canada, let Israel become the 51st state of the United States of America. They have 51st state solution. How's that? 51 state solution.
Not sure. Yeah.
I know it's not real, but in theory, if they would become like another state, not of America, but if they would become their own state, they can even call it the state of Israel if it's the 51st state.
Well, that would, but essentially,
there would be wars
dissolving
between who and who. Why would there be wars? One person, one vote, one land, one country. But you see this one-state solution that they talk about, people think you got to fight wars and they got to be killing and death and blood. And no, the whole state only exists. This state that they want to eradicate doesn't even exist except on paper.
That's the same with all states.
No. America is
the state.
No. America is the state of the American citizens. Israel is not the
on paper.
Yeah, but there are real American citizens, and America is designed. America's designed to serve the American citizens. But Israel, which is the name of the country, is not designed to serve the Israeli citizens.
Okay.
It's designed to serve a Jewish nation. That's the difference. Israel, as the Israeli country, only exists on paper as a country because there is no Israeli nation. There is no Israeli nationality. That's what I'm saying. Change that law. There is no Jewish nationality anymore. There is only an Israeli nationality. Israel is the nationality, and let Israel exist in the sense that other countries exist. There's an Italian nationality, and you want to make it the nation state of the Italians, make Israel the nation state of the Israelis. If you're an ethnic Israeli, make a law of return that if you were in Israel, your grandchildren who are now citizens of Mexico can return to Israel. Israel, other countries they were made by a paper document, but they function as a functional country, meaning the citizens are citizens of the nation, and the nation is made for the citizens. Israel is not made for the citizens. It's made for a nationality that is different than all other nationalities, a nationality that you can only convert to with a religious conversion. You can't be nationalized into it. And by their law, the people who are not part of that religion / nationality do not have self-determination rights. Even if they are citizens and they are Zionists and they buy into the ideology, this is incoherent. It's not the laws. The laws are creating the country. The laws are creating all this friction because Israel wants to be... Look, the very idea that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, you saw why. This is the prime minister of Israel that goes around trying to make everybody believe anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. You saw why he said anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Because France is to the French what Israel is to the Jews. Make France is to the French what Israel is to the Israelis. And you'll solve that problem right away. All of these problems, people think that the reason why Israel wants anti-Zionism to be anti-Semitism in order to silence criticism of Israel. That is a secondary or thirdary reason. The main reason is because Zionism aims to make Israel the state of the Jews. The Jewish identity and Israeli identity, the same thing. And therefore, if you get rid of the philosophy, you get rid of these, you get rid of the nonsensical, logically incoherent national structure, then you let it function like a normal country. The citizens and the nationality and the country,
right?
The relationship, yeah, but it is a democracy now for the Jews.
No, but a representative.
A representative, not of a citizen, not of the nationality of the citizens.
Yeah.
That's the thing. In other words, it's the nationality structure that needs to change. It is a democracy, but it's a democracy of Jews who live there.
Am I right in saying you protested against the, a potential Israeli law conscripting Orthodox Jews to the IDF?
Absolutely true.
How would that favor in a democratic state where all the citizens are treated equally?
Then the Israeli army is different than any other army in the world?
It's just funny because I'm only laughing because it's like a running theme across it, isn't it? It's like
It's one idea. That's exactly my point.
It's like everything you pointed out here
is all the same thing.
It's unlike any other nation. It's unlike any other. Yeah.
For one reason.
Yeah.
Because of their trying to create a nationality out of a religion, even if you're not religious. But you don't become part of a nationality if you convert to the religion. This nonsensical idea, don't forget, Israel is the Jewish state, the state of the Jews. They don't have a coherent definition of Jewish state, Jews, nation of the Jews. That's the one problem that if you solve it, everything else is downstream from there. When Ben-Gurion, he was the first prime minister, he said, I think it was the 1951 election, around there, he said, we have a country, but we don't have a nation. We need a nation because there were so many Jews. By the way, they were banking, the Zionists were banking at the beginning of the 20th century that the Jews from Europe would move to Israel, and there would be like kind of a European Enlightenment type Jewish culture in Israel. But then came the Holocaust and the Jews in Europe were wiped out. They had to take a lot of Oriental Jews, from Arab Jews from those countries, and there was such a mix and match, and they were religious, non-religious. They didn't count on this motley crew of different types of Jews. So they need, and they have nothing in common. When I told you that Jews in Ethiopia, Yemen, they have nothing in common, the Jews in Israel had nothing in common.
Right, at the time.
At the time. So how do you make a nation out of a country? That's what Ben-Gurion said. So here was his answer. There were two answers. One, the educational system. He hired a guy, Ben-Zion Diner, to create a fake Jewish history that the Jews always wanted self-determination and to twist that everything, all the aspirations and the natural trajectory of the Jewish people was to create a state of Israel. But the more important thing, because the Haredim, the religious Jews, do not go to the secular education system. They have their own private religious education system, is the army. The army in Israel is a melting pot. That was Ben-Gurion's phrase. It makes everybody into Israelis.
Right.
And it's an educational institution. The Israeli army, I don't have the book over here, but I have it in my book. I actually quoted it about the officers' training manual, and the IDF was shown to have the following topics for discussion. The officers' training manual. What is Judaism? Is Judaism a religion, a civilization, a nationality? Kiddush Hashem, martyrdom, loosely translated, sanctifying God's name. It means literally dying for your religion. In Judaism, what does it mean? It's a discussion in the army. They teach you about Judaism because don't forget, Judaism is the nationality of Israel. They use the Israeli army as an educational camp for Zionism. By way of analogy, if England, there's a Church of England officially. Let's say the British Army, right? Or Navy. Let's say the Navy back in the olden days, right? The British Navy, they would teach you, a Muslim would come, what your imams taught you about Islam, or what your priests taught you about Christianity is wrong. The government will tell you what a real Christian is. Christian is a national, a Muslim is a national, and we have a history, and this is a church. This is not a military. Israel's military functions not merely as a military, but also as an indoctrination camp for the Zionist godless religion / ideology. A godless religion, but a religion nonetheless.
Okay, but let's say
Israel would be a normal country. It would not be called Israel, it would be called Holy Land, and it would be a regular democracy. It would not represent, then it'd be like Canada. And then guess what? They would not want to draft the yeshiva guys.
Why?
Because the only reason why they want to draft the yeshiva guys is because they want to change them into Zionists. Israel has a problem, and it's a problem all over. There's discussion all over the Israeli government. The Haredim are not Zionists. That's a problem. I have over this JPPI.
It's a demographic issue.
It's a demographic issue, and they are the fastest growing demographic, the fastest growing community, and they are the most anti-Zionist. I have over here the statistics from the JPPI.
But I'm just curious, if it was one state, if they did away with this whole Zionism, it doesn't represent, world Jewry. Essentially, if they implemented your solution, would you have an issue? Would you protest against conscription of Orthodox Jews to the IDF?
No, but then there would not be conscription of Orthodox Jews to the IDF.
No,
wouldn't be.
Let's say everyone had to serve. There's countries where everyone has to serve.
Yeah, but that's true. But the Orthodox, first of all, they don't need them.
No, but I'm asking you the question.
Yes, no, I would not.
You wouldn't?
I would not. If somebody then doesn't want to serve, let him leave the country. If Canada United States had a draft in the Vietnam War.
Right.
I was not old enough to get drafted, but I had friends who were. By the way, they did not conscript the yeshiva students.
Okay.
The rabbinical students were exempt.
The yeshiva,
Yeshiva means the rabbinical
okay.
academies, I guess.
Okay. I thought the yeshiva were the pre-Israel Jews.
Oh no, it's the same word. That's yishuv.
Oh right. Oh, the yeshuv, yeah.
No, it's the same.
Sorry,
it's the same root. No, you're right. It's the
that's
same.
my mistake,
It's the same. Yishuv.
Yeshuv,
Leishev means to sit. So, and loosely, a loose translation or a branch of that word is a yeshiva, which means a study hall where people study place. It also means the yishuv, a town.
Okay.
A place. So they're related words, right? But yeshiva is a rabbinical academy from elementary school to past people who are married, and they were exempt. But then leave the country. A country has a right, if they really do. Israel doesn't want to draft the yeshiva students because they need them in the army. They want to draft them because we have documentation of this a lot. They want to draft them because they're not Zionists and the only indoctrination camp of Zionism is the Israeli army for the Haredim. No country has a right for forced religious indoctrination for people. No country has a right to come and say, let me teach you about Judaism. America would not tolerate if the American army would start teaching about Christianity in the army, that the government knows about Christianity and what a good Christian is. England would not tolerate if the British army would do that. What right does an army have to do such a thing?
Right. No, I was just curious on that point.
So if we're talking about taking all Jewish identity out of Israel and making it Canada. By the way, I'm not joking. In theory, I know it's not happening, but in theory, if Trump would buy Israel and make it the 51st state, that would satisfy definitely all the anti-Zionist Orthodox Jews. It would be great. Now, one democracy, if it's not going to be the 51st state, it'll be its own state. But a state like America, Canada, Australia, you could separate. Or you want one thing: separate church and state in Israel. Get rid of the nationality. That's all you need. And people.
I think you're speaking for a real minority, though. Is the only thing here.
It depends what you mean minority.
I mean, when you say it would satisfy all the Orthodox Jews.
but I'm saying even from a religious perspective.
Yeah.
But it would satisfy a heck of a lot of other people too.
Okay.
The people who are fighting in the Supreme Court, all the people that want peace, the people who believe, like the Zionists themselves.
I don't think they want to be, a part of America as such.
That part I'm joking about.
Okay.
I'm just saying a thought experiment.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm saying if they would become their own state,
sure, yeah,
then that would be great. Here I have over here from the same JPPI report.
Yeah.
They say the differences between the different levels of religiosity in Israel, the secular Jews, the Orthodox Jews, is not merely, and they're right about this, but they had to take a survey for it, is not really in how religious you are. It's the definition of a Jew, its identity, what the whole country is about.
Is built on.
That what?
What the country is built upon.
What's it built upon? What a Jew is, the whole identity of everything. That's why Israel has so many elections. Because they can't even decide. In America, we know what America is. We know why it's here. We know what it stands for. We know who the Americans are, right? The question is right-wing, left-wing, whatever, okay? In Israel, they can't even decide. There are such disagreements between factions. What Israel is, what a Jew is, what a Jewish state is, why Israel exists.
Well, it's pretty young as a state, though, isn't it? And these things usually happen early on.
But it's not because
the
they
US
haven't
has
worked
been
this out yet. United States has a constitution. We worked it out from the beginning. We have some amendments and we develop it. But at the beginning, we're also pretty young, the United States, compared to England, compared to the European countries. 1776, right? So we worked it out at the beginning. Everybody knew what America stood for. There was a reason we made America, right? We had a constitution. We had a Declaration of Independence.
That excluded blacks.
I know it. What?
It excluded blacks, didn't it?
That's true.
Well, that's a massive difference
that's
between
true,
what it stood for then and what it stands for now.
Wait.
We're talking 400 years
No,
300 odd years.
It's two different things. It's not what it stands for. You're talking how it behaves. There's no question that America, like the rest of the world, has become much more liberal from 1776 to today.
It's not just a case of liberal.
It changed a lot of the laws and made more equal rights. But when we started, we had a starting point. There were things that needed to be fixed. There are people who are, they had slavery. They did have slavery. Slavery was legal when America happened, right? Fine. So that was a contradiction, really, to what America stood for. And they had to realize it's a contradiction, and they had to have a civil war.
No, it's what they stood for at the time.
Well, they didn't stand for slavery. It's not in the Constitution that we're here to make slaves.
But it did exclude black people.
It did exclude them. It did.
As Israel currently excludes non-Jews.
It's not the same.
Self-determination.
It's not the same. Israel makes them equal citizens, but it says we are not the country of this nation. In other words, it never said we are the country of the white people. And therefore, blacks are like Canadians or Mexicans. That's not what it says.
It said there are slaves.
That's right.
That's potentially worse.
It is, but it's a different type of fix that's needed.
Right, but my point is then, it's a different type of fix that is needed.
You're looking at
America took hundreds of years to get to this point.
That's a different problem.
I'm just saying.
It's a different problem they're trying to solve.
And I'm no fan of Israel.
It's a different problem they're trying to solve.
Yeah.
There, it's inherent. It was in the human condition. Racism, that women aren't equal. They didn't have votes either at the beginning, right? Etc. That was part of humanity. Western civilization believed that. There was something in the people that was bad that had to be fixed. Very simple. People had to evolve. I don't mean biologically.
Right.
People had to evolve. And the country reflected the people, right? In Israel, even if...
It didn't reflect the black people.
It reflected the people that made the country.
Yeah, and Israel reflects the Jews, that means.
No.
The Jews within it.
No.
It doesn't?
No, it doesn't. Because the Jews over there believe that Jews... And that's what I'm saying. It doesn't. Do Jews believe in Israel that non-Jews are inferior? The way Americans believe that blacks are inferior?
I can't answer that question.
After what I said, based on what I said, is that the problem? Is there any evidence or reason to believe that it's true?
There's certainly, massive racism.
That's not my racism.
Yeah, just give me your question again, exactly, precisely.
Do you believe?
Yeah.
You said that, like America, slavery reflected the American humans, right? The people that made the country.
I'm saying they had that starting point.
Yes, at that point. Israel reflects the attitude of the Jews. Do you think that the attitude of the Jews to non-Jews is similar, comparable, and therefore the same type of problem? I'm not saying better or worse, but the same type of problem as the white people's attitude towards blacks, towards women, an inferior, superior type of human being sort of thing.
Well, are you asking me if the sentiments are the same?
Similar. The same, they're not. I know you're not going to say they're the same, but are they similar? Is it the similar type problem? Is it the human that needs to
From what
evolve?
I hear, I do get that impression.
Okay, so everything I said should take away that impression, or at least render it unnecessary. Because what the Israelis did, of course there's racism. There's racism there against even black Jews.
Yeah.
Or
this is what I'm saying.
Or Sephardic Jews. That's true. But that has nothing to do with, but don't make the mistake to think
It's that and not
that's the
Zionism,
issue
right,
with the Palestinians, with the West Bank. Even if the people in the West Bank would be, I don't know what, perfectly white supremacy, it wouldn't make a difference. The issue is not a question of an inferior human being versus a superior human being. The issue is that Israel, every country is made for a certain group of people.
I follow you.
Israel was made for a
nation,
nation like all nations.
Yeah.
There's the French nation, the German nation, the Italian nation, and the Jewish nation like the Kurds. Imagine the Kurds would one day get together and find a land, Kurdistan. Maybe even fight a war somewhere in Turkey they'd get, right? Let's just say.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, if you're a Kurd, this is your country. If not, you need to convert to the Kurdish, whatever it is, to be it. But they would not give equal rights to people who are not Kurds. That would be a problem with the country, but it's not a question of inferior, superior. This country is Kurdistan. It's made for Kurds. If your father was a Kurd, there's a law of return. It's made for Kurds. Everybody else has rights, but only Kurds have rights to self-determination. So long we were looking for a country. We were persecuted, the Kurds, Yazidis, whatever you want, right? We were persecuted. Now we have our own land. You don't like our laws? Yes, our laws are preferable to Kurds. This is the nation state of the Kurds. This is the shelter for Kurds or Yazidis, whatever, all over the world. That's not a superiority, inferiority, same thing like whites versus blacks. They didn't say this is the country of the whites, of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, America. They didn't say that. They thought whites are superior to blacks. Men are more reason to give them voting rights than women, whatever. It was an idea of human inequality. This is a citizenship structure. This is a nationality structure. Just like in England, people who are there, who are not British citizens, have less rights. I'm certain that's true.
People who are there, who are not British,
right,
as in immigrants.
Wherever, they came illegally, whatever it is.
Oh, right, okay.
Or even legally, but they're not citizens.
Okay.
They have less rights.
I don't know the law well enough.
Let's assume they do.
Okay,
It wouldn't be a major problem.
Okay.
That Israel doesn't work on citizenship, it works on nationality. Converts to Judaism are part of the nation. It doesn't make sense because Judaism is a religion. And I have no problem if they would say it's the Jewish nationality and you would have a way, let's say it would say...
Of becoming part of it.
Of becoming part of it, to be naturalized, right? Let's say the Palestinians could become Israelis and then have equal rights as the Jews. That would be fine, right? Like, again, like America annexed the Mexicans and they became Texans, right? That's normal, right? There could still be racism, but that would solve the problem. That's the solution.
So Zionism is if I can summarize and tell me from, right or wrong. Zionism's a core issue, the ideology that dates back, 100 or so years. This is a core issue that is not being discussed by your estimation.
It's not understood
enough.
what it is.
Yeah, and it's at the core of all of these offshoot issues.
That's right.
And the remedies are essentially Israel needs to become a state of its citizens.
A way to be naturalized into an Israeliness like a normal country.
And the sort of discrimination.
That you don't even need to do that because once you do what I said,
it would end it,
there wouldn't be.
Saying,
It's discrimination against people who are not the nation.
Yeah.
But change
I'm
that.
with you indirectly.
Change the citizenship structure, which is based on this nonsensical idea that the Jewish people are a nationality and Israel is its state.
Yeah.
Now, I have spoken to many people about this, Palestinians too, and a lot of people, they don't want to talk about it. You know why?
Why?
This is...
Mossad.
No, not Mossad. Because this is, for you, let's
normalizing.
let's say as a Muslim, right? Yeah. To have a discussion about what Jewish identity is or what... It's an internal issue between the Jews. All we want is don't bomb Gaza. That's the attitude I get by a lot of people. But
I can see that being the primary concern. I mean, children are being blown up.
That's fine.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, the best thing for everybody involved in the world, including the Israelis. And again, when I say something like this, so you're going to get some comment on the video. Oh, see, he's only concerned about the Israelis. He's a supremacist. That's not what I mean to say.
Sure.
I mean that even from
people will always say things, if
from
they
from the Zionist Israeli, most, even setting aside the major problem of people getting killed in Gaza. Forget about that for now, okay? Not because it's not a problem, because I want to discuss something else right now. The root cause of all of this is a messed up, incoherent, bad in all ways possible ideology called Zionism. And people need to study that, to understand that. And the answer is sitting there in front of everybody on a silver platter. And the proof is, they had Supreme Court cases in Israel about this. They did. Had the Supreme Court in Israel ruled differently, so many things in Israel would be different. And you saw that they said that the nation-state law, many people believe, is a big impediment to the peace process.
Right.
So I agree with them. I'm just giving you a shortcut. I'm saying you don't need wars to get this done. The main thing I'm saying is like the kiting of the Czechs. There really is no Jewish nation. There really is no state of the Jews. Even if there would be a new Jewish nation, what made Israel its state? The whole thing is smoke and mirrors, like the Wizard of Oz. Just, open the curtain.
Yeah.
The whole thing is a fake. And once the whole thing is exposed as a fake, I know the time's late. One more thing I want to make over here. I have over here a very important document.
Yeah.
The Hasbara Handbook. Promoting Israel on campus.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned this previously off camera, didn't you? Yeah.
Now, this was written 2002.
Okay. Is it a bit dated then, or?
That's fine, but I want to make a point to say that you could predict Israel's behavior by the way they establish their ideology.
Right.
They have these think tanks. They have Zionism, and there are people who sit down, figuring out, like the Hasbara people.
Yeah.
And listen, check this out. The first page of text: the reluctance of Jewish students to get behind Israel unconditionally is probably connected to the gradual shift in our generation, this is 20 years ago, towards attempting to find personal meaning in Judaism. Meaning, the kids in those days, the college kids in the year 2002, okay? Because they were finding personal meaning in Judaism.
Right.
They didn't need Israel as a Jewish identity. So the goal is, it's a competition. Israel competes. Loyalty to Israel depends upon your identifying Israel as your Jewish identity. If you find personal meaning in Judaism, you're not going to support Israel as much because you don't need Israel as much.
Radically.
This is not me talking. This is the Hasbara Handbook. Okay. This is their assessment, which means the more you support Judaic Judaism, the more Zionism suffers, the more Zionism weakens. And the more Israel strengthens their identity as the Jewish state of the Jewish nationality, the more people unconditionally, that's what they said, support Israel. Now, so what is the solution? They started thinking, what are we going to do about this? I have an article over here by a guy, Stephen Bain. It's one of the big Zionists, let's say thought leaders, we'll call him. American Jewry in the State of Israel, How Intense the Bonds of Peoplehood. Jewish Political Studies Review, spring 2008. So now we're talking about scholarly journals. And look at the question, American Jewry in the State of Israel, How Intense the Bonds of Peoplehood. The truth is, 0. Israel's the state of the Israelis. I'm an American. My religion is Jewish. I have as much to do with the Jew in Israel as I do with the Jew in Russia. So now listen to this line. Now remember their problem. The problem was, back there about 23 years ago, that Jews are finding personal identity, personal Jewish identity, so therefore they're not unconditionally supporting Israel as much. So here's what they thought of doing. This was 2008. Here's they started a campaign. Lastly, Jews and Americans alike need to understand the centrality of Israel to the identification of Jews as Jews.
Right, it's at the core of the identity.
And with the broader Jewish people, given both the place of Zion in Jewish history, according to Zionist interpretation,
Right.
and thought, and the transformations in the Jewish tradition wrought by Zionism, the new Jewish identity made by Zionism,
Right.
the American Jewish-Israeli relationship cannot rest solely on strategic interests, or even, for that matter, shared values. You've heard all of these things. Right? That, no more.
Judeo-Christian.
No more. Not anymore. 2008, they started talking. That's not good enough.
Right.
Because people wanted shared values is fine, but I have my personal Jewishness. Instead, the relationship rests on being a Jew and being part of the Jewish people in the 21st century. In that sense, denying the Jews the opportunity to support Israel is to deny them the opportunity to be themselves. So now we have something called identity Zionism. Being a Jew and being a Zionist is the same thing. Remember what Netanyahu wrote? Remember what Avigdor Lieberman wrote? The Jews are a nationality, and just like you can't have French people without France, you can't have Jews without Israel. The strengthening of Israel, actually, the supersessionism of Israel, of Zionism superseding Jewish identity, is what they rely on for support of Israel. And without this, you want to know why the Palestinians should be interested in this? One more thing. That Supreme Court case
Okay.
about they sued because they wanted an Israeli nationality.
Right.
You ever heard of the right of Jewish self-determination, right? And that's why they taking over the land, right? If Israel is just the state of the Zionists, not the state of the Jews,
Right.
do the Zionists have a right for self-determination there without being representative of all the Jewish people? So here's what the Supreme Court said when they wanted this Israeli nationality. Remember, if there'll be an Israeli nationality, that means Israel is separate from Jewish nationality. It doesn't represent the Jews. Now listen to what happens. Talk about the peace process.
Is this that same
Same case.
2018?
Yes, 2008.
Okay, this is the 20...
No, this is not the nations. This is the Supreme Court case.
Oh, right, yeah. With the...
Shalamet Aloni and the... In addition to the ruling, which relied on the judgment of the district court in the matter, it was an appeals case, and they confirmed the earlier court. The president is the head of the court. That's what they call it. The president added that, in his view, the principle of the right to national self-determination was intended to apply to nations and not to fragments of nations. In his opinion, recognition of such nationality, meaning Israeli nationality, might lead to national and social fragmentation of the entire nation. The president added that a separatist trend of splitting the Jewish people was unacceptable, meaning that if Israel doesn't represent the Jewish nation, if it's then they don't have a right to self-determination.
Then the Jews become, not sort of a...
The Jews have nothing to do with Israel. Israel is Israel. A bunch of Jews, they are Jews, but they're not the Jews. Israel needs to be the Jews to exercise their right of self-determination. Yes. Right. In other words, it's not me saying this. This is their Supreme Court.
The character changes, and they don't want that.
And now they have rights to self-determination. Now they have their rights, they claim. Now they represent the Jews. Now the entire Israel and all their philosophy and ideology, it's not due to a human supremacist thing.
I think there are undertones, there's a bit of racism. That could be,
but yes.
But you're saying it's not the core.
But that's not the core of the issue. This is enough in and of itself to create all the issues. This necessitates the problems. And if you eliminate this, it necessitates solutions. They said so, not me.
Right. Well, that was a pretty comprehensive...
Actually, it was just scratching the surface.
For honestly. Me, anyway, it was probably viewers as well.
What's frustrating is that since October 7th, how much hours of talk have people spent on Israel with the Palestinians in Gaza. and talking about Jewish self-determination and Jews and Israel and a right and historical right. But the main issue of Zionism is being skipped over because this is a subject in and of itself. It's a ideology. And people looking at it, the problem is people looking at Israel as the organic path taken by the Jewish people.
Right.
This is, you have the Jewish people and the Palestinians. The Jewish people want the land. They have a historical connection, religious connection, the Balfour Declaration, the partition plan. Then you have the Palestinians, indigenous people. You have their connection to the lands. Now you have to balance the Jewish people versus, and their religious and historical connection to the land versus the Palestinian. But those are not the combatants. Though that's not the issue. There is no Jewish political connection to the land. There's a big Jewish spiritual connection to the land. Has nothing to do with the state of Israel. The people that created Israel have no interest in anything Jewish. They're just forced into being Jewish because of anti-Semitism. And now they had this scam that they made, that let's make a Jewish nationality and we'll be the state of all the Jews and we expect the Jews to cooperate. And to the Jews we say, we're protecting you from the Hitlers and the Islamists. And the whole thing's a big scam. So the issue that people are discussing and fighting about all the time, the Palestinian connection to the land and rights to the land, and the Jewish connection and rights to the land. I'm not even talking about the Palestinian connection rights to the land. Let the Palestinians talk about that.
Right, yeah.
And again, to all those who want to write nasty comments, I didn't mean that I don't care about it.
Yeah.
What I mean is that my area of interest that I know about, that I can contribute to, is the other side of the story. The Jewish connection to the land and Jewish rights to the land have nothing to do with the state of Israel.
Yeah.
It's not the Jewish people. It's not political rights. It's the whole thing is just smoke and mirrors.
Deception.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully people have enjoyed that.
Hope so. And they convince themselves. They
enjoyed. I don't just mean enjoyed, by the way. Learned.
And they convince themselves of this nonsense. There's such a funny thing. Benjamin Netanyahu is an educated guy. He is an educated guy.
Disingenuous people.
No, but listen.
But I don't think everyone is, and people listening are open to learn.
No. But I understand. But listen, it's not. There is obviously amount of dishonesty there, a lot, but there's also self-delusion.
Okay.
There was a story, and there's a clip of this on YouTube. The Pope visits Netanyahu.
Okay, yeah. We'll round off with this story. Yeah.
The Pope comes to visit Netanyahu. He's in Israel, and they're speaking through an interpreter. You can find this on YouTube. Put in Pope Netanyahu visit, and Netanyahu is talking to the Pope about Israel. He says, Jesus lived here, and he spoke Hebrew here. So the Pope says to Netanyahu, no, Aramaic. And the interpreter says it. Netanyahu, for a second, he's like, oh, yeah, right. But he understood Hebrew. Netanyahu knew, if he would think for 5 seconds, he would know that he'd be making a fool out of himself in front of millions of people watching this if he were to tell the Pope that Jesus spoke Hebrew and the Jews spoke Hebrew there at that time. They did not.
Right.
And the Pope corrected him. And yes, he handled it very politically. He recovered from that fall.
Right.
He rolled with it. Yes, but he understood Hebrew. But that's not what he wanted to claim to the Pope. In his brain, he has this delusion, this mirage of the Jewish people always speaking Hebrew, always trying to get there. He actually convinced himself. He knows, not even so deep down, just below the surface, he knows it's all baloney. But on the surface, he's like an actor that's, convinced himself that he's his character.
Right. So we need to send help his way. Help someone, get deep down into his thought process and make him comfortable with himself, such that he doesn't uphold this I'm making a bit of a joke about it, but
Yeah.
essentially what you're saying is, these people are convincing themselves deep down they know, but it's all a bit
A
of a
lot of them
facade.
depends who the educated people.
Sorry, when I say these people,
Yeah,
I'm talking
right.
about
A guy like
Netanyahu.
Netanyahu. Yeah.
Not to generalize, yeah.
Right. And if you speak to them, I speak to them all the time, the Zionists, educated ones, older ones.
Yeah.
The younger ones are just, they're whatever. They're not, the ones that aren't so educated. But the older ones, the ones that, and you speak to them and they don't really have a coherent ideology of their own identities. That's what people should be doing who don't like Zionism. They should be mocking it and
Talking it through.
and educating people about this.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing that, and you've certainly done that today. Is there anything you want to share? Or, presumably this will go up in various. Well, I'm going to send you a copy and whatnot. And, do you want to share anything or your website or?
I have a podcast, committinghighreason.com.
Not treason, reason.
That's exactly the point, because Jews such as us are anti-Semites, according to the Zionists. So it's not treason, committinghighreason.com, where most of the topics are about Zionism.
Right, yeah.
I actually have one podcast, though, refuting philosopher David Hume's problem with the Kalam's cosmological argument for the existence of a God.
So you delve into some philosophy of God as well, theology.
Yeah,
philosophy.
but it's mostly about Zionism.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for hosting me in your house in New York. I won't put the address out there for everyone.
You're welcome.